Good morning. Check this out. Anyway, pro tip, guess what? I don't need to buy new lights because I've got these soft boxes. You know how when you got those sort of that two soft box things with the big globes, the bulbs. I found out, I opened it up and I was curious because I was like, can I buy a smart globe for these things? And it's just a standard E27 light globe. So what I did, here you go, cheapo hobo lighting tip, is like I bought a smart spotlight. You know, the ones that they're like E27 bulb, they're like for the outdoors and they like color changing and, temperature changing. I put it in the soft box and like it works. It's not, obviously I've still got to adjust it. It's not perfect, but it's way better and cheaper than like buying a whole fucking $1,000 light set. But it'll get me going, keep me going for a little while until I can get the fucking fancy shit that I want. If I do, who needs that shit? It's weird how I've seen people who are like way, way more like rich than me who have worse production values. There's people who make so much money just bitching on YouTube about everyone. And they like have millions and millions of views and it's so fucking, I don't get it. I don't understand what's different. I thought that, anyway, I'm not complaining. I'm not moaning. Obviously, I've demonetized the channel. It's not really my goal. This is just where I riff while I do my real work. But at the same time, it's astonishing when you go how much thought and time, and believe it or not, I do prepare, but a lot of this is like 30 years of experience and just talking. But being able to carry an hour on a live stream is not as easy as it looks, okay? But there's a lot of people who just... they sit there talking shit about people or shit about fucking everyone and name them and use clickbait and they get like much higher. But anyway, so it's almost like the internet's designed for people who are fuck with. Anyway, so good morning. How you doing? Again, lighting's not perfect, but it's okay. $25 spotlight, the smart globe, and I can actually just dim it and adjust it as the like daylight and bits and pieces fuck around and change. But I'll fix it. I need to buy a couple of other things before, like a new stand so that the positioning's a bit more correct. Anyway, so, and there's people that are like, oh, why do you take time to get stuck into a live stream? Whenever I watch these things and I watch people take 45 minutes to even talk about the thing, it's like, my 5 minutes is fine. That's normal for a live stream. It's actually quite bizarre, the standard that women are held to or like non-Americans are held to on these things when like if you actually watch most of the live streams, okay, not the clips, the live streams, like people are on the curve. I'm very much sort of in the middle, okay? I'm not high production, I'm not polished, I'm not scripted. But that's not the purpose of the channel. But at the same, it's just very interesting to sit and observe this stuff. Again, because I have no real skin in the game. I don't want to be a YouTuber. I find that offensive when people call me that because I'm not that. It's not content. I'm just using this as a tool to develop my skills and riff. And if I build an audience, then so be it. But my real work is elsewhere, okay, which is in the writing and training and all that stuff. I'm not sure if that noise is coming through. There's a fuckwit broom outside. Cunt broom is what Heath Franklin, Chopper. I know that sounds funny, but there's a comedian who's just tremendous. And yeah, he calls those things cunt brooms. There you go. Anyway, so as I've been writing my book, I wrote half a chapter yesterday. I started obviously a big part of writing a book. I'm at the stage where I've written most of the ideas and concepts and the outlines and the stuff, but now I've got to add in the data and the research and the, all of that boring shit. It's not too much of it, but you got to make it a book, right? That's the difference between a blog and an essay and a diary and a book, is that a book actually requires effort. All these people that think that this stuff doesn't require skills and effort, they're people who consume content. They don't make content. Anyone who makes it knows how hard it is. Anyway, so not that it's content. You get what I'm saying. So, so I was writing the book, putting it together, and it was part of that process is obviously going through old stuff, right? Old written things, old blog posts, old Facebook. You download your Facebook data. I've got all of that stuff into documents. See if there's any sort of old, like the one thing about being an oversharer online for 27 years is that you've kind of unwittingly kept a diary so that when it comes time to write something of substance, you've actually got sort of little snippets and minutiae, and you can find dates of things, and all of that. You can remember things. It's actually really useful for that, just as a tool. So if you're not a journaler, which I'm not, and there's a reason for that, and I'll explain why. This is why I do the streams, right? Because I edit while I write. I can't get over that. And if you read the book, when it's done, you'll realize why that is, which is because basically the theme of this shit is if you write something down, someone's going to read it. And I usually get in trouble for it. So I can't, I try to do like Natalie Goldberg's writing exercises and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, I edit while I write. So I figure it's easier if I just talk to a camera out there. It's much easier because if you say stuff, you can see my intent, you can see my body language, and you can see that I'm just sort of free-forming and going. And I will take some of the bones of these ideas and I will develop them after. It just seems to be a better process for me. And also I'm planning this weekend on going on a long drive and dictating and seeing if that works, to see if I can just tease some memories and thoughts that stream of consciousness is a very important part of writing, good writing, okay? Because you've got to kind of get through that monkey mind, right? So anyway, doesn't matter. Get to monkey mind, sorry. Writing down the bones, Natalie Goldberg, gold standard of writing. Okay. But yeah, my style is just to edit first, and I don't do that. Anyway, move on. But a big part of that, so I have the benefit of my impulse control issues on Facebook and my blogging over the years, and despite a lot of it not being public now, I still have it there. It's still there as a record, and it's still there as data. And it links to what I'm talking about today, which is it's there forever. Okay, now, which is interesting when you see sort of the view of someone in their life. But, we're seeing few people drop off the perch lately. There's a lot of death around, okay? And, I'm always conscious of what my last impression might be. But that's a whole other thing. But I noticed that there's a lot of people, especially with this gender stuff and, complicated issues, the cleavage. It's actually a word in politics. It's cleavage. I remembered the word cleavage again through my read. You don't remember everything. And then you'll go through and you'll read some stuff and you'll read some theory and you'll do whatever. And you'll go, fucking hell, I've forgotten about that word. Yeah, cleavage. It's actually a word in politics, which is I called it fault lines, and I'd forgotten that there was a word for it, which was cleavage. But they're cleavages, okay? In any political tribe, there's going to be cleavages. I'm actually thinking of that being the name of the podcast because it's pretty funny, and it's like, yeah, there's a lot of puns and stuff we can make on that. Is that when you're trying to navigate through the cleavage, right? Cleavages. When you're in the cleavage talking business, it can get on your tits. No. Still warming up. I haven't had my coffee yet. But I think a lot of it is digital literacy. But what I wanted to, let's go back. So, going through my content, I read a blog post, okay? I read a blog post that I wrote actually I'm going to read it to you because it's actually funny to see just how naive I was. But also this is the thing that I have to keep reminding myself, I'm a fucking expert in this shit. And I fell afoul of this bait and switch that I talked about in the last stream, right? Shit changed around me. Where I've done what I've always done. Okay, I haven't always done this live stream thing. I haven't always, but in some form online, despite that sort of editing thing, I've always been pretty. I mean, yes, there was an amplified version of myself. Okay, I've always been just, I talk like on Twitter like I always have. Nothing has ever changed, okay? Now, with my blog, nothing has, well, I haven't written for 2 years because I got fucking so crippled by writing the wrong thing after being fucking turfed that like I got so scared of writing it. I wanted to go away and write something of substance. So, but over the years, I've generally just, like I said, I've been a crash test dummy for a lot of this stuff. I've just gone in and gone through and just fucking everyone else sort of observes and sits on the outside and is safe. I just go right through. So if there's like a, I'm going to use an analogy, right? And this is how but you also end up with a greater understanding, which is that if, here's a racial one, okay? Something where people are uncomfortable. So in Australia, we've got Indigenous population, right? Who are, highly mistreated. It is obscene how we treat our Indigenous population. We've got, anyway. But on the bus, there's always been this weird dynamic, which because I live in cleavage and I live in the gaps. I like the gaps, okay? I go, I like sitting there watching things that people aren't saying, where they're saying things. And, that's why I'm sort of at odds with politeness, because I can see sort of where people are talking around each other and what they're avoiding. And that's more interesting to me is the shit that people aren't saying, or the conflicts that exist between these people. But when people aren't saying shit, it's just funny to me. I find that funny. And so because I, grew up using public transport because my grandma raised me and didn't drive. So I was always getting the bus everywhere. And my dad lost his license because of lifetime suspension from driving because of drink driving, right? So I was public transport. So from a very early age, there'd be this weird tension, okay? And it's like if you look at the George Carlin entropy fan bit, right? I should play it for you. It's funny. But I'm like, it's like that where there's a tension that rises in a room and shit gets funny and it's just tense as fuck. And I laugh. I can't help it. My reflex is when things are uncomfortable to just laugh at it. But so you get on the bus and even as a kid, I'd noticed that there's sort of like the middle class people in suits. Okay. I love public transport for this reason because shit could go down at any time. I love that. I love it when shit could go down at any moment. It's just like, so exciting. It's probably why I like the internet. But on a bus, sitting on a bus at like 10 years old, I was catching the bus on my own, like 9 and 10 years old, and but you'd have sort of in peak hour, you'd have this sort of, you had all these sort of middle class people who were working in the city and they were all fancy and public transport was beneath them. Let's be honest. Okay. It's beneath us. Or beneath them. I don't give a fuck. But I used to love it because if you catch public transport, no matter what area you live in, there's always sort of the notorious crazies, right, in Perth. So I don't know I'm sure it's like this in other cities, but it's because we're a small city. Yes, we've only got, when I was a kid, there was only 1 million people in Perth, okay, which for a city is small. There's more like 2 now. But whatever bus line, so you'd have like 4 main arterial roads. Okay, I'm getting to my point. I will get to my point. This is where I explore ideas. Join me, don't join me, whatever. Okay. But that said, I just want to tell people I demonetized my channel. So if you do want to help support me getting this book done, you'll get a free copy of the book and lots of love from me. And so I'm trying to get it to a point where I am a publishing company, like on the books, but I'm looking at partnerships and seeing who might be able to publish. I'm trying to pitch the book as well because I just need financial support to get this thing done. But if you want to keep me independent, you can do that. If you don't, that's cool too. I love you anyway. And I'm not going to hold it against you because if you pay me, then if you pay me, then I have to care about whether you think I'm on the point or not. That's the trade-off, right? Is that if they pay you, they own you. Okay. I don't want that. So anyway, so Perth has the city that I live in, Perth. When I was a kid, it was different. So you had the city in the middle, the river, 4 arterial roads, north, south, east, west. West suburbs are the rich cunts. Okay, they're out near the ocean, all that stuff. The south of the city, it sort of was sort of the south of the river was like the Povo area. South of the river was kind of a mix. It was like the kind of upper working class, okay? And there's a lot of homes, West housing. I grew up in state housing and like council housing in the UK is what you call it. You know, there's a lot of that. A lot of Aboriginal communities. You know, I grew up around a bunch of Indigenous kids and, you know, all that stuff. I talked about that. That was why I went into social work. I grew up in these estates, right? With like 3-year-old with nappies hanging down their knees going, hey, can I have a smoke, mate? She was like, you're 3 and I don't smoke and I'm 12. There's an argument for like behavior is modeled. That's a really good example of that. It's a funny one. These are all said, they're not racial. Again, it's not a racial stereotype. It's just an experience I went through. And that there's humor in some of that stuff. It's obviously there's a sadder story underneath, but that's just how it is. Okay. It's just my life. I'm talking about my fucking life. If you don't like it and don't know my intentions are anything but like good and decent, then you can go fuck yourself. Middle class woke fuck. Anyway, I see you. I know what you're doing. So anyway, it's almost like I'm an expert in it or something. So anyway, yeah, but you know, so there's this real bizarre sort of class dynamic in Perth, especially around public transport, right? But I love it. One again, because, and this is probably because I grew up with my father, who, despite his alcoholism and like not functioning alcoholism, which I fucking understand, I got to go through this shit without drinking, man. Can you imagine? My dad, like I think he figured it out young. He was born bright. He was different. He was creative. He was a brilliant musician. He was a nurse. He did anything that he tried, he was good at. That is both a blessing and a curse, okay? Because I can be sort of put a week into something and I can be mediocre at it. People used to get pissed off at that. That sounds braggy. It's not. It's actually a curse because it makes me lazy. It makes me not put in the extra mile that other people actually do. It made me lazy, okay? So that plus ADD makes you lazy. But I also understand that because of my dad's environment, there was sort of a hopelessness and it was class. I think my dad just had fucking class consciousness, right? And he just drank himself to death in the end. I have a more charitable understanding of him now that he's gone, and I think about stuff and I go through this myself, and I'm his age, you know, when he really fell off the rails. Kind of get it, but I don't drink. So I just take lamotrigine to get through the day. I don't drink. So anyway, so in Perth, because we've got this really, there's a unique class dynamic in this city because we're heavily dependent on farming and mining and you know, kind of manual and trades and you know, haul pack drivers, right? Haul packs, those giant mining tractors with the really cool things, right? I'd love to just quit and do that. That'd be awesome. They earn like $200,000 a year, like without even trying. Okay. So heavily we're transport, mining, you know, if you want to get rich in this country, in this city, okay, it's very heavily weighted towards the tradies, which when you're sort of looking at like the managerial class or, you know, like say Sydney or Melbourne, you've still got the sort of financial class. You've got the, you know, the educated class, you know, all of that. So, but what I grew up with was a narrative that if I went to university and I got a degree and then I went and did this, I would be better than these people. Okay. This is how you process it as a kid. I don't obviously believe that. I'm saying as a kid, because I grew up in such a horrible position, I was like, how can I get out? How do I get out? We're told this. If you grow up poor, you know what I'm talking about, that you don't want to live like this anymore and you need to find a way out. There's people that get trapped in it, and I didn't want to repeat the cycle, and there's people who get out, and I was one who got out. Okay, I think Ricky Gervais talks a little bit about that stuff too, the class stuff, which is that education is your ticket out of, I'm not even working class. This is welfare class stuff, welfare class. I don't like using underclass because that's a loaded term, but I like welfare class. Okay, welfare dependent. So you know, where you're at state housing and you know all that stuff. So I grew up in the welfare class. Real prole, man. Real prole. And so I sort of I bought the lie because I was smart and I was gifted and all the teachers were telling me that I was this fucking prodigy, and again, all that pressure. Like, all I feel now is disappointment at how I didn't do stuff, that's a weird thing to go through, because for most average people, by average standards, I've achieved like a lot, and I'm smart and all those things. That should be enough. But unfortunately, ADD and various other forces have just made me sort of average out to ordinary, right? But as a kid, I was gifted. So everyone, except my family, but the people outside of my family around me were saying, you're gifted, you do this, you do this, you do this. So university became that ticket, that magic ticket. And it was just too much fucking, even now at 42 years old, I still think that in order to write a book, I need to do my PhD first. Like, it's so wired in my self-worth and identity. It's crazy. But anyway, so in Perth, it's funny because you grow up with that narrative, okay, that if you're like in this situation in the southern or eastern suburbs, and, you know, you've got the western suburbs, which is like the posh people, okay, the people who never leave those suburbs, they grow up in them, they think that the south of the river is where you go to, you know, take photos of the wildlife and that sort of stuff, right? And I mean that class, not race. Okay, I'm saying just bogans and stuff. But there's these weird class dynamics that are unique to my city, and this is getting to the point about politics. I will get there. Okay, I'm giving myself permission to get to my point, because they force you to have a name on the video. If I didn't have, I'll just anyway. But in Perth, so it's kind of funny to see in my lifetime, particularly because in sort of the late 90s, there was a mining boom, okay? So we've always been dependent on mining, but with China and all of this stuff, we carry the rest of the country economically in terms of trade, okay? Because we've got oil and gas, we've got a lot of mining and all of the services around mining. It's a mining city, okay? Think about how Detroit was around Ford. And we're like that around mining. It was just the place. It's the place to work. So you grow up as a kid like me going, I'm going to go to university and I'm going to be better than them. All that stuff. Again, child narrative, simple narrative. I don't believe this. I'm just saying it's what you internalize. And then you go and you get your degree and you can't get a job. And you go in and I go, okay, well, I want to go into social work. I want to be in politics. I want to change the world. And then you go, fuck, I can't. Then you spend 2 years in the ALP, find yourself at 2:00 in the morning stacking branches because the AGM's coming up, and you go, oh, okay, this doesn't seem like a really ethical use of my time. Okay. Yeah, stack branches. Fucking hell. Come on, just tell the truth, guys. Now, it's built into the system. These incentives, they're just built in, okay? And then you get into all the factional shit, and it's all about the numbers and all that sort of stuff. And you go, well, that wasn't real. I thought it was about policy. Turns out it's about 2% of the fucking thing. Again. But you go there and you can't get it. So I don't want to be in politics. Politics is something that I don't want to work full time in because it's just not who I am. I'm not wired for it. I'm not aggressive enough. I just don't have that. Well, first of all, conscientiousness, but second of all, in terms of conscientiousness, in terms of personality trait, and also, I'm just not wired for, it's like that Wolf of Wall Street, fucking hustle, merit, fucking mentality. I'm just not wired that way. I avoid when there's conflict, I usually am the one to back away, unless it's my husband, and then I fucking go for it. Generally, in a social setting where I will back away. Okay. And I will avoid, I am more of a negotiator and a facilitator. And it's why I've been good at things like policy over the years and policy convener and just organising people. But I'm not good at like confrontation. It's not really my thing. I do sort of this here. This is largely kind of persona because I've got to keep you engaged. But for the most part, I'm a lot more, I don't see the point in all this fucking screaming and screeching and shit, right? Just not how it's not a good way to. I'm not saying that politics always has to be respectable. Okay, I'm just saying that it's just not. I like to just push through the conflict sometimes that can get heated and ugly, but I'm impatient for the resolution. So anyway, discover that, want to change the world, go, okay, all right, I'm qualified enough to get the sort of field work job in child protection. I'm going to go to the country and be a child protection worker, right? That's why I love Veep so much, because as much as I admire that character, there's always that flip side where it's like, I really relate to the character of Selena Meyer, where I'm razor sharp, I'm good at politics, I'd be good at all of that stuff, I'm good at policy, I'm good at negotiating. But I know that ugly side exists, and it's just not the kind of side of myself. It's a side of myself that I actively fight, first of all, which is that kind of self-indulgent narcissist side of me, which I don't like. I don't like that about that tendency. So I do try to keep it at bay as much as possible, despite the fact that I can live stream for 2 hours and I can talk about myself. But other than that, this is, anyway. But that that's something I have to work on all the time, okay? Because I've had that aggressiveness modeled to me as a child, so I work on that. But there is that. Politics and business as well, okay? And it comes back to the pop blog post I was talking about. But is that there's some sort of weird chip that you need where you can not be affected by it, where you can somehow make the trade-off and be okay with it. I can make the trade-off, but over time it just I end up just in a suicidal depression, right? You get what I'm saying? Like, it's like it just accumulates and accumulates and accumulates. And that's why I don't sort of do the corporate ladder thing either, because I just find that over time it just chips and chips and chips away. And I you self-censor so much. And this, again, these are all linked. These thoughts are all linked to each other. They just don't seem that way. This is how most people write, believe it or not. But they are, which is you just put it on the page and then you sort it out later. But yeah, there's a part of you in politics that I just wish that we could find a way to do it differently. And this, watching AOC, every politician that I know, eventually they get kind of beaten or they end up sidelined. So if you run in the Greens or you run in a minor party, you're a one-term wonder. You have no real, unless you've got sort of a balance of power vote. Sorry, not balance of power. It's too early. I wasn't planning to talk about this. The vote that will pass or fucking hell, it's left my brain. Whatever. That, unless you're in a position where, you've got a minority government and your vote matters, you really don't have much power, right? To change anything. If you're driven to change the world, there's not many avenues in which to do it, because most of it's just stitched up by middle-class people for a start. So there's barriers. Anyway, I was talking about the bus. So in Perth, there's this weird dynamic, right, which is it's kind of backward, and that makes it funny because you've got you'll have the sort of the first class lounge at the airport, okay, and you've got all these suits from like Sydney and all the finance and managers and all the academics and all that sort of stuff. But you'll have a whole bunch of people in high vis in the first class lounge. It's funny because it annoys the people in the suits, because there's this whole weird status thing. Again, I'm not really a social climber. I'm just someone who's aware. I've always been aware of the fact that I'm not them and they're not me and they don't like me, too vulgar, all that sort of stuff. And that's been a chip that I carry, most of my life. So, but in Perth, so you've got the mining class, okay, and they're all tradies, they're all bogan, they're all swear, they swear like a sailor, they got missing teeth, and they got more money than all of us. So the tradies in Perth are largely our 1%, which is hilarious, okay. So when you had the mining boom, you had basically they were buying up and building McMansions down south in like Rockingham, shit, big McMansions and all that stuff. But they were also they never really moved into the western suburbs, but they did set up camp in McMansions along the beach, right? because that's what they do. They got jet skis and shit that they got to play with. It's funny, right? So there's all this weird sort of north-south, like any city, but it's just funny here. But also on public transport, you see that play out too, because you've got sort of your everyday bogan, all right? We call it bogans. Okay, you're a bogan, mate. You're a bogan. Redneck, right? But they could be a millionaire, or they could be worth $2. Okay, that's really funny because you just don't know. So again, it's just there's a strange social dynamics here. I don't judge people based on that shit anyway, but it is just funny. It is just funny to play with people. So just a different dynamic here. Where, you know, because of the toothless people have all the money, yeah. But they kind of coexist on public transport and all that sort of stuff. But then you've got Indigenous people who jump on the bus. Now that was what I was talking about, where that ability for, you've got sort of your known crazies. So they become famous in a weird way. There's a guy called Adrian, Mad Dog. He's famous in Perth, okay, for basically he's on his bicycle. I think he's gone now, but he was actually a friend of my dad's, which was funny. I knew Adrian, but he was like the town crazy because my dad was like me. He was interested in the town. He's just interested in people like me. We're very similar. But I hope to make it more productive than destructive, but, you know, the jury's out on it. But he used to just drive up to the bus, ride his bike up to the bus, past the bus, and just scream at everyone who's sitting on the bus and scare them and go, rah, like this on the bus. Fucking hilarious in retrospect. At the time, it was obviously, if you're very middle class and there's people who laugh at Adrian and people who are scared of Adrian. It's one of those polarizing things. And it's the same thing when, when you've got your known homeless, okay, your known homeless people. Now, I can talk about this as someone who grew up in the welfare class that I'm not, it's just you got your known crazies, your known homeless, you know, that you interact with, okay? And that's common in any city, okay? If you're paying attention, and I make friends with the homeless people because they're cool and fun and weird and got interesting stories and shit. Yeah, one of the most amazing things I ever had. Sorry, not ever did. I don't do, yeah, sorry. Ever received, was a guy who was on the streets. Very sad story. I used to buy him a cup of tea every day. Like, this was in Sydney. And he was he was a sort of 50-something-year-old man. But he had the mind of a 6-year-old. So he would talk about me like he was 6. So I'd sort of sit there and I'd buy him a cup of tea. And he lived in sort of a hostel sort of a little further away. And it was just one of those really sad cases. He seemed happy, but you know what I mean? He didn't know that he was unhappy, right? So he'd go up and talk to everyone, and I'd just buy him a cup of tea every day. And I also would just give him a credit at the local coffee shop. They didn't like that because it was one of those yuppie places. But he used to go there and buy tea. He used to beg for money to buy tea, to buy a cup of tea. And or what he would do is get money and then buy himself a packet of tea bags and then ask the cafe for hot water. So what I did was I went and like gave him a tab for his tea so they couldn't fucking refuse him as a customer. I've done things like that. But anyway, so him and I sort of talked to each other. There's only so much you can do. But he gave me this drawing that was drawn like it was like a 6-year-old. It was so weird. But it was just, you know, this is but I love, again, pissing off the fucking yuppies. They were mean to him because I saw them be rude to him. And so I went and said, give him what he wants and I'll pay for it. And I did the whole time. So anyway, that's not me. I don't normally talk about these things. It's part of the story, which is pissing off but so you've got your known crazies, and then you've got the sort of the extra level of welfare class, which is the kind of the Aboriginal families who are on the streets, they're living rough, but they're loud and they're fighting and they're brawling and they make everyone fucking uncomfortable and it's great. And so what I would do, that was what I was talking about, cleavages. So there's this thing on the bus, okay? And again, this is like, if you're American and watching this, we have different racial dynamics to you, okay? So just you know, if there's one thing you understand is that the history of racism in the United States is vastly different to the history of racism here. They are both horrific, both ongoing. both shameful, but they're different. Okay. So, because, Aboriginal people tend to still be dispossessed. They're really, there's a lot of stuff where it's just culture clashes and just all this sort of really complex stuff. Okay. That constant tension between sort of helping and colonising is a dynamic there that's just fucking, I think, unfixable, but we do the best we can, right? So anyway, but so you get on the bus and you have your suits, but the second the fact you'd have your own crazies and your own families, and they'd be effing and bluing. One of my favourite sentences of all time was when I was on a bus going to university, when I was actually med school. Yeah, that was the med school one. When I was on the bus, I was getting the bus home, and we were all on the bus, all the white people all on the bus, and a family of 3 Aboriginal people got on. It was a teenage daughter, a mum, and a grandma. No, a teenage daughter, I think a brother/cousin, and her mum. And it was basically the greatest, most efficient sentence of all time. We're just talking and talking and talking, and this teenage girl turns around and says, "Shut your cunt, mum." The perfect sentence of all time. The thing I love most about that is that it's succinct, but also that without any of the words in it, the sentence loses its impact and meaning. So it's like if you lose, shut your mouth, mum, it's not the same. If you say shut your cunt without the mum, it doesn't have, it's just perfect. Anyway, so you have this weird dynamic. I wandered off. Have this weird dynamic where you get a family, you get on the bus, but all the white people are uncomfortable. The middle class are uncomfortable. Everyone's like, oh, shit, assholes go and tighten up, okay? And it makes the fucking middle class and the people on the bus who don't think they should be on the bus, and it's beneath them because they think that one day if they act like if they act like they're better than everyone else and go to university, that they might be able to get driven to work in a limousine one day. Okay, they're too good for the bus, those people. Right? But what I do, and this is what I do online, it's what I've always done, which is when I see that fucking, that cleavage, that gap, that fault line. So everyone will go, mate. So you see, it's funny. I love it. It's kind of brilliant trolling, which is to go through. So the family will get on the bus. Over time, people will move towards, because they don't want any shit. They don't want any conflict. But having worked with Indigenous families, having worked with Indigenous people, the way that the communication is loud and like shouty and sweary and, like my family, fighting all the time. It sounds like fighting, but it's not. They're just sort of interacting, right? Just when you take the time to understand, again, the hundreds of different Indigenous cultures in our country for a start. But second of all, how they interact and expectations and culture and all that stuff, cultural difference, it's fucking amazing. There's a lot we can learn from it. But again, it's like being misunderstood. Like people think because I swear that I'm not educated. It's the same kind of thing where you make an assumption. So there's all these racist assumptions built in. But so on the bus, over time, when you get your sort of on your known crazies on there, people will just sort of inch towards the front. Like they'll slowly just find an excuse to move, trying to, not make eye contact, not start some shit, because obviously, first of all, if they're a crazy, then they'll start some shit because they go, what are you looking at? But one of the funniest things to do, which having talked to a lot of people, that having been a social worker now, is that one of the things that it's just fun to troll people and say, what the fuck are you looking at? And think that you're starting something. That just shows the racism, right? So it's a bit of fun. So they always, again, it's complicated, and I'm probably telling this badly, but it's just fun to think about. I had no real plan for this stream. I have a rough theme, as you know, and then I'll get there. But so you'll see this. And my favorite thing to do when in that situation, when things were uncomfortable, was to just go and sit right in the middle. Go right to where the loud family's sitting and go, how you going? Have a conversation. Do that thing. And I learned so much, okay? That took me, what is it, 40 minutes to get to my point. Oh, well. There's still a value. I can always get to it later. That's that's the thing I'm trying to fight, is this pressure to get to the point all the time. Because you know what? There's a lot of people who are constantly doing shortcuts, and as a result, they're wrong. And as a result, they're actually doing harm, and they're doing like bad takes. I like to take my time, think, go through it, work through it, okay? And because I edit when I write, this talking is good because I tease out stories. I didn't expect to be talking about this stuff. It wasn't expected, but I started to think about cleavage and the bus and class, and it sort of went into a different direction. That's fun. It's interesting. It's a conversation. So yes, I have. Sorry, and fear is the mind killer. I did see your comment, but I just was. Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed. I like it about you though. Like that you're working on it too. Oh, you mean that sort of that? Yeah, but we all have that. I'm just honest about it. And I just, like I said, I tend to be more transparent about things, and I understand that I try to model what I think. No one's fucking perfect. Everyone has, and I've got so much trauma and so much shit. If you knew like what I've overcome in my life, you would know that I'm actually, it's the benchmark that you said. Again, it comes back to class, which is that for a man, the benchmark is low for them to be successful, right? For the benchmark, and this is where I think maybe we could talk about politics in that way. Because again, this is another one of my frustrations with politics online, is that I take it as perspectives and opinions, but opinions aren't facts, first of all. Also, people can just agree to disagree that like for me, my experience growing up working class, I accept is different. My perspectives, my politics are going to be different because of what I've seen and lived. But if you've grown up I've been friends with some of those people in the western suburbs who never left and in Sydney, who are like the wealthiest fucking, they're the 0.1% of Australia in those areas where they think they work hard and they're mediocre and they, minimum amount of effort, and they've had everything sort of made easy for them along the way. Of course, you're going to think that if you're poor, you're lazy. Okay, that's because you haven't actually taken the time to listen. And I see social media as an opportunity to get different perspectives and hear people's stories, not people's takes. Okay, but you know who they are as people. I think this is where it's gone wrong. This is where I think getting the social part of social media, which is what was intended, has actually just become a reality show and like Idol 24/7, trying to compete for attention. Okay, you could put the incentives in place, and people are going to be inauthentic. They're going to be they're going to feel pressure to not take, to not spend an hour and a half talking shit on stream. They're going to want to do the quickest, fastest, easiest, solution when there are no easy answers to things. Okay, I'm really fucking angry with Tim Pool right now. Yes, it's obvious he's a dickhead, but no, he's not a dickhead. I actually like him as a person. I'm conflicted, but this Australia narrative with the riots, it's just overblown and it is incorrect, and it's obvious propaganda. When you understand international relations and you understand the actual dynamics at play, it was an obvious warning shot as part of a negotiation. There's something else going on, okay? And America likes to show its weight. And so they basically plant some propaganda to freak out the fucking people so that they'll sign on the dotted line. It's obvious what's going on. Okay? If you know how the system works, there's no conspiracy. It's just how things work. Anyway, but I'm frustrated with that because it's like, well, you could make one video a day and think it through, or you could make one a week and think it through and give something that's actually of value. And yeah, and it's almost like this. Well, we know this. We know that capitalism sort of encourages and incentivizes the worst parts of ourselves as people as well. I don't believe that people are bad inherently. I think that through it's not even what I believe. This is just the evidence, which is that it's a combination. You're born with certain genes, and you fight. Everyone is in a constant battle between their best impulses and their worst impulses, and and if you create systems that like encourage people And then you starve people of material well-being and the ability, like the basics. Okay, so your Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you starve people of the basics, and sort of put self-actualization at the top of a pyramid rather than as a learning process throughout a whole life, that if you make it's kind of a weird. You could actually do a nice political analysis of Maslow's hierarchy, because it's been sort of distorted into something where, well, you're only allowed to think about the world once you've once you've gotten past subsistence. I mean, that's really the kind of takeaway. If you don't understand the science or psychology behind it, or what a lot of this stuff is, you're going to that's just going to be another good idea that was sort of misappropriated and taken by capitalism to justify. Well, so what we'll do is we'll create this system where people are struggling for their basic needs. And so if they want more than that, or they want to think, or they want to create, or they want to, be a whole person or get to self-actualization, if you're in the self-actualization phase before you've taken care of your basic needs, then you're a bad person, or you're selfish, or you're a narcissist, or you've got, something wrong with you. It's like, well, no, that's, and those that are at that stage where they've got their basic needs met, but they're in self-actualization mode, right? They sit there and feel superior because they feel like they've sort of achieved something. But if you've got a system, an economic system, that people can't get past food, shelter, safety, belonging, everyone's at the bottom of the pyramid except for a handful of people, they're going to want to, it's going to spill out into social media, because there's going to be that, I believe, if you critique Maslow's hierarchy has been, okay, it all interacts. Everything interacts with the other things. There's no one thing. But I think if life is anything, it is a constant search for context and meaning and belonging and, self-actualization and learning. And if you can learn at any point. Okay. You can learn about yourself at any point. It's not something that you take care. It's not a hierarchy. Okay. It's not meant to be, again, this is that bait and switch that happened with American capitalism, which is that the word hierarchy changed. Everything, they just sort of, that flip in language is really fascinating. It's really just thought reform. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, but everyone's got those in a constant struggle between good and bad and good and evil, or parts of themselves. No one's fucking perfect. Okay, everyone's sort of. I tend to be charitable. Everyone is doing the best they can. Even psychopaths and sociopaths. A lot of that stuff is just environment. I believe that you solve a lot of problems when you take care of people's basic needs. That's what it means to be a socialist. Okay, is to just make sure that basic needs are met, so that everyone gets a go at the fun stuff. The good stuff, and you can't, everyone's got their oxygen mask on so they can put masks on others, so to speak. Not enforce fucking masks on others, which again is a symptom. All of these things are symptoms of like economics, like they really are. So, but if you look at it from that point of view, I can't remember where I was. Yeah, so I go in. So online, so I was just sorting through my thoughts. Give me a sec. Let me think about it. Okay, so I don't sort of observe. Like when I first looked at this stuff, I don't know if you read my blog post, but when I first looked at this stuff, the gender stuff particularly, because I don't really stay in the race thing, because I just go, no, it's not my thing. It's not my thing. It's not my business. Okay, I'm an ally. I will do what is, but I listen. I don't speak about race. I listen. They're different things. Okay, I don't virtue signal over it. I do the work, okay? And that's the thing. I actually listen and do the work the way that it was intended, which is to just be conscious, okay? And sensitive and do little good deeds without fucking making it about myself. Again, we've got to fight those impulses. But we're in a system that incentivizes our dark parts, okay? The shadow. Talk about Jung, okay? It encourages our darkest parts. And our best parts are starved, okay? And that's where you see the sort of the psychology, where it's like, well, I can't really actually spend the time to learn about this stuff. Like most people don't even know how laws are made and passed, okay? Like my last stream, I was watching it, and Paul was like, I'm not, like, when I was explaining how laws are interpreted versus passed, and like the judiciary, and like, he's like, he doesn't even, like, most people don't know. And that, my husband's smart. He's just not political. Most people don't know how these things work. But they don't have the time. They can't take the time to learn it either. Okay. So if you take some sort of cookie cutter easy thing, you go, well, I'm constantly fighting this bad part of myself, this twisty part, which, this device that sits in my hand somehow seems to bring out the ugliest parts of myself. What I want to do is I just want to try and do good. All right, let's try and do something. I want to try and prove to people that I'm good. I try and prove. And that's the difference, I suppose. Sorry, to come back to Fear is the Mind Killer, the comment, which is that, we all have this inner conflict. I've integrated these parts of myself because I've got a decade online longer than everyone else for a start. And I've also had, I've had to navigate the public figure thing versus the private, all that stuff that I've talked about before. But also good and bad, but also overcome trauma and, go through divorce and figure out who I am, and, and that's what's happened online, which is that, people have I've kind of put that online, and I've gone through that process in good faith. And it's, with self-awareness but you can put that stuff, okay, like, that's what, okay, it comes back to how I was going to open this, which was that I was going back through an old blog post. And again, I've always just been, up until recently, I was running a digital agency that I'd started, and I was naive because I thought that, I could do 4-day work weeks and, pay more than asking rate and all those sorts of things, and try to be, again, I've always been a fan of being the change that you want to see. And so for me doing this long rambling stream where I'm not under pressure to fucking create content, okay, but actually just think and get you thinking and get you curious, and maybe go, oh, I'm going to question that, and I'm going to think differently about that because everyone's life circumstances are different. Then that's the change that I want to see, is to get people just thinking and relaxing and just, being a bit nicer to each other. And I don't mean nice as in fucking, a psyops nice. I mean just nice. But I mean, actually some of my very early work, I wish I could find most of the stuff. When I was in 2000, some of the early social media work was very heavily on personality and the concept of applying the shadow personality online, because I was already seeing that, because I was going through that, which is that I'm okay, for Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFP, which you wouldn't think online, would you? You wouldn't think that I was an INFP. You would think that I was like fucking, ESTJ, fucking full-on extrovert. And I sort of started to realize that there was maybe this sort of shadow part of myself, which I talked about yesterday, which is I was stripped of my social context. And so my hypothesis was that there was a sort of shadow type. So some of that, Myers-Briggs is not, it's obviously been replaced with Hexaco and Ocean and those Big Five and all those things, but similar principles, which is that in a digital context, when we are depersonalized and dissociated from ourselves and in a different social context, that we have actually different shadow personality styles, okay? So that has been applied to Myers-Briggs under stress. So when I'm under stress, I actually just go, because I'm a feeling fucking bleeding marshmallow mess, when I'm stressed, I actually turn into the opposite of that. Super hyper literal, super logical, black and white, yet loud, that sort of stuff. So that's shadow self. But what I started to see was sort of an augmented shadow type emerging online. Now, again, because nobody ever fucking valued this work, it disappeared into the void, as, it does, because no one fucking cared or listens. And I never wrote it down, but this was some of my early work. This is like, 2009, when I started to see this, like this disconnect between people I knew and how they acted online. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. There's a shadow type there. So that does, and that's played out, right? I really should have fucking written that shit down. Oh, well. It was actually it was in some workshops and stuff, which is to be mindful of the fact that people are sort of, interacting differently online than they would in real life. This is in the book, but anyway. But what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, so Jung has helped me. So there was a comment. Jung has helped me with this too. I love his concept of shadow work. It's spot on and needed now. Yeah, it is. And this is the problem with this. Again, with this, I met the easy answers packaged up, fucking, these dumb fucks in gender studies who think that studies replace other studies rather than it being built on, which is that, yes, this is the funny thing about, say, something like Freud or, Maslow's hierarchy of needs or all of these things, is that if you're actually thinking holistically, okay, and taking it charitably, you'll see that the science backs up Freud's theory. Now, Freud's theory had context, which was that it was sexist. It's like, I started studying psychology because I wanted cocaine and hooers. Where's my cocaine and hooers? He just fucking basically got high on cocaine and fucked a bunch of patients. That was Freud's fucking context, okay? It was going to be misogynistic, but there was some glimmer of fucking truth to it. There was an epiphany to it. This is the thing I think that also shifted in education, which is that people aren't allowed to just write epiphanies anymore. It's considered, it's held to the same standard as like some sort of research. This is actually why I'm probably not going to continue with psychology, because all the psychology's gone. Because psychology used to be a branch of philosophy and, hypotheses about human nature and, these big theories. And you can't have a big theory anymore. What you've got to do is sit in a fucking lab and measure things. And I go, no, that's too much admin. So I'm actually just going to, I was thinking of just beefing myself up with sort of heading back to politics and policy and like international relations and stuff. Seems to be, and studying radicalization. I think that might, again, I'm across so many disciplines. It's just hard to know where my home is. But I'm thinking that maybe that might be where I am. Yeah. I was in tears last week, and I was like, "What the fuck, Paul? Am I going to have to work for the feds? Is that my only option? Am I going to have to be a cop in cybersecurity? Is that where I have to be as being everything that I don't want to be?" And it's like, so I'm hoping that maybe if I'm just author and commentator and stuff, I don't know what I'm doing. I just like thinking. But I'm the kind of, everyone talks about Da Vinci and Freud and Marx, and they've stripped them of everything, and the whole education, it's ironic that the whole education system has been built on these things and these concepts. And it was built there on classical thought and epiphanies and just writing things down and having ideas about human nature, being right and being wrong, a combination of being right and wrong. But, the bulk of your work, your job was to think, okay? Now your job is to produce and to somehow debunk. And it's like, well, no, that's not really, it was actually to think and debate and discuss and be compelling and have an argument. And there's all those things, right? Which is that, yeah, okay, so fear is the mind killer said that's why we need you in it though. Yeah, and that's what my lecturer actually said, that because I had a conversation, deep and meaningful. The thing is I'm now at that place where I've got to start thinking about fourth year. And I looked at it and it's all methods. And I think that would be true if I was sort of 20, 28, 23, but I'm 42. By the time I qualify and get to a point where I can meaningfully, like Jessica Taylor is, I stand her. She's fucking brilliant. She's just done it, but she's younger than me and she's got the energy and she's got the time and she's got the that sort of stuff. I feel like I've just more needed talking about some of these issues from the outside of things, because also, and this is going to lead back to the theme of the video, okay, which is that when you offer up ideas and when you talk about things, when you put yourself out there, there's a flip side, and that's what Dying by the Sword's about. It's what the book's about, which is that we don't necessarily think about sort of the long-term consequences of our actions. Okay, and at one of those things for me would be the psych board, which is being registered as a psychologist, and it was the same thing. Like I've always sort of I've done so much uni. I've got so much HEX debt, and like not much to show for it. Like I've done veterinary science, med school prep. I didn't actually go. I sat GAMSAT. I I got a politics degree. I got a master's in public policy, cobbled together degree in legal studies and communications. I've got part of a master's in communications, multimedia. I've got a part of a law degree. And internet, started to do my degree. I was like, oh, internet studies, that's multidisciplinary. And then it's like woke as bullshit and fuck. It's like, no, there's no substance to it. So it's like, okay, well, let's try something else. But I've done a lot of units in things. Okay. I'm one of those old fashioned learners. Like I said, I was like, everyone's inspired by Da Vinci, but if you actually do work like Da Vinci or work like someone who's a cross-discipline thinker, or Aristotle, or the sort of thinkers of the time, that the system is set up to sort of strip that now. It doesn't work that way. Because I actually thought, well, I'm just going to go do so, because, from psychology, you got sociology as sort of a sort of discipline, in its own right, which is more sort of about systems and politics, sort of like that bridge between psychology, comms, culture and politics is kind of that weird thing. There's no postgrad sociology anymore. It's disappeared. They're all business degrees. They're all commercially oriented postgrad. MBAs, business, fucking management, even the politics is still international relations and security studies. It's not politics, right? It's not social sciences. This is the consequence of, I'm going to talk about this like at length, quite a lot, okay, which is I had no idea about the consequences of talking about critical theory, that there was a really like, that it would be used as a weapon against like anthropology departments. And it was the quickest excuse to wipe out these departments, which have been under threat by other disciplines forever. Now, I do like the scientific rigor of psychology, but I also I realized that it was just stressing me out. I like psych theory. I love psych theory. I'm home in psychology, but the nature of maybe it's the university I'm at, because it's in the medical school, so it's a lot more sort of empirically oriented. It's more like very heavily experimental. But so I want the Bachelor of Arts psychology bit, not the fucking the boring as batshit dries and uns cunt psychology. So ADHD and university I find it fascinating, and this again comes back to that woke thing, which is it's obvious what this is. When you actually sit and you go, okay, and you observe the actual impact, okay, and you look at it and you go, okay, this is a way for the university to pretend they give a fuck about neurodiversity, pretend they give a fuck about all of these things without changing a thing. Because I actually had to go, okay, Monash, right? ADHD. I wanted to get registered on the disability services. So that if I was because when I'm under stress, I panic and I kind of, shut down, you get into ADHD overwhelm. If you know about that, then, sort of like hot. And if I'm really, really stressed, and research methods does that to me, the numbers and stuff, because I just get stressed about, that's just not my strength. Okay. I can do I can do it. I can learn it. But when I'm under pressure, when it's like a melting pot of pressure and deadlines and it being an intensive course and all that stuff, because it's like a semester in 6 weeks. So you have to learn a lot of material in a week. So if it's one particular area that I struggle with, which has always been methods, okay, I can learn. I know enough, but like you need either time, which is like time to learn it and apply it and learn it properly, or you need to get what I'm saying. It's like that's my area. And when I had a week to get all of this stuff in for this assignment, I fell apart. And all I wanted was a 2-day extension. Okay, and I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to keep asking for these 2-day extensions, because there's an assignment due every week in an intensive course, this one fell apart, which was that, I either have to say I'm sick every week and it's going to look like I'm bullshit, or I'm going to get I have to get on disability like support thing. And I thought it would just be, okay, letter from my doctor, I have ADHD. No, they want me to go through a reassess. This is for the School of Psychology, I might add, with researchers whose area is ADHD and autism and all those things, okay? They said, the School of the Disability people said, you need to go through a full cognitive assessment with your psychiatrist, and we want to see it, and those cost thousands of dollars. Also, there's a fucking waiting list, and it's just like, hang on a minute, but I thought you were woke. I had to sit through an hour-long fucking onboarding video with a person with green hair telling me about what a standard drink is and code of conduct. Seems to me like there's a glaring gap here, and the institutional bullying is still institutional bullying, right? And it's just like, yeah, and so my reply to them was, okay, well, I'm in the school. Can you recommend someone who studies those tests? And I'll do it, but I'm not paying that. Fuck you, right? And it's just like, no, I was assessed years ago. I don't have that, okay? I have a letter. I have a fuck ton of medication that tells you that talk to me for 5 minutes and you'll know that I fucking have ADHD. Watch one of my live streams. Read one of my emails. You'll see when I either don't reply, forget to reply, or you get an essay. There's no middle ground. Okay? I either care or don't care. But yeah, and I think but that is actually really, I think that's something that I think we don't really address is what we're telling our kids. This is why I've said to my kids, like, this is why I let my son, like, I think most middle class people will be horrified that my son is largely free range, sort of homeschooled. It's very flexible. You know, I let him learn and experience because, he's got a lot of different things going on socially and stuff. And I just let him be. He'll be fine. He's smart. He's the smartest. He's funny. He's smart. He can type. He can write. He's fine. Okay. He will figure it out. And if he wants to go back to school at a certain point, he will. He's literate. He can add up. He can run a YouTube channel. He can talk. He's fine. Right. And this is the problem where we put these narratives, these structural stories in place that you are, because also, okay, let's go deep now, which is that I had nothing but I grew up in a hazing family, okay, which, I understand. Again, when I say that I have to fight these impulses in myself, this is just what was modeled to me, which was that the way you show people that you love them is that you cook for them lots and lots of food. You don't show people. I love people. I fucking love people more than most do. I feel everything, and I'm like, that card, the Warner, I will, with Daffy Duck, I will call him George and I will love him. Excuse me. I love things to death, right? I'm like that kind of person. But I also do it in a really fucked up way because I wasn't shown how to show love properly. So like me screaming off my head shows that if I don't love you, I just walk away. I don't give a fuck. If I love you, I'm yelling at you, and it's fucked up, right? It's not good. These are impulses. This is what I had. Or I'm insulting you or shading you, and also because I'm a bit of a fucking smart-ass comedian, I'll have jokes that don't land that can come out sounding quite vicious unintentionally. It's not my intent, but that's just, part of my wiring and who I am. So that's the side of me that I fight all the time, is that jokes just don't land, and my intentions sometimes come out to look like the opposite to what they are. I also mix up words, as you'll notice. When you watch my streams, you'll see I'll mix words up and malaprop, and it's part of the fun, okay? But what was I going to say? Yeah, so the grades and accomplishments thing is that the only thing that anyone ever valued, not my family, but the only thing that I ever got any real sort of love for was my ambitions for education and university. Like this, as much as I love my grandma, my alive grandma, the one that, the story that she talks about all the time is that from when I was 2, I was saying, I'm going to go to university. I got it in my head. Again, I was 2, developmentally 4. Like I was vastly ahead, like in terms of speech and stuff. So, I could read at 3, read fluently at 3 years old, right? You wouldn't think that now. I can barely speak now. But the only thing that got me any sort of genuine praise or attention, not attention because I've never really cared for that, but genuine acknowledgement and praise, okay, was that story that Taya was going to be the one that went to university. I was the only person who went to university in my family. In my family, it was like, what do you think? You're better than us because you went to school. And I was like, well, yeah. I didn't, I don't think that now, but, I had an attitude problem. We learn from our mistakes, but that was so it's such a big part of my identity that, and that's why when I enrolled in psych, I had to go, do I want to do psychology? because I was like between psychology, counseling, and IR for my next thing that I wanted to do. And I was like, and I had to admit to myself that I just wanted to be a psychologist and I wanted a PhD from a real discipline. And I go, well, that's not a very good reason to have $100,000 in debt, is it? When, actually I'm finding that I actually outthink. I'm actually at a point, I think that, and it sounds so arrogant to say it, but you do reach a point if you're living your life and paying attention and reading and well-read, like I pretty much read a book a week since I was, for fucking my whole life. That's a lot of knowledge, right? You reach a point where you fucking out-learn the universities, and that structure is now there as a status. It is. It's very much, they get you, they hook you young, and they make it so that it's a big part of your identity. And they groom you to think that that's the only way that you're actually going to be considered intelligent or have anything to say. And they beat all epiphanies, all unformed thoughts, all maybe thoughts that don't have like evidence yet but are proven true later on, say like sort of hypotheses, and you have to build on other people. But what if you're different? Right? What if you're a different thinker? What if you're 10 years ahead? And that's where I find myself, which is that I'm ahead of everyone with this. I always have been, and I'm always the person who was right later on. Right more than I'm wrong. I'm not always right. Like I was wrong about James Lindsay. But this is this again, headline of the video, maybe I should address it, which is that, had I known, I went into this like gender thing with good faith. Like I wrote about this in the blog post and talking about politics on social media. So I went through an old blog post, right? But I also think that I've come, this is why I'm finishing the book, because I don't think people care about, I think they just want to see a body. Like my mistake has been that there is a body of work, because I've got a whole 600 hours of me talking about this stuff. This is, you can show that I actually am capable. If someone asked me to do a TED talk, I could do it, okay? Wouldn't like it because it's fucking too structured for me, but I'm saying I could be a speaker, I can be those things. I can talk about it, I can appear on things, I can do that stuff. There's IP, right? I have work. But I think I've always had a disconnect between, because I'm ahead of the industry and because of work. This is where class intersects, which is that I've always just had to survive. I've had to pay the bills. Like talking about politics online, you have to be conscious of the fact that I haven't been able to really, I've lost so much money from doing this. I've lost, and part of it has been because I've realized that there was a direct cleavage, conflict between what I talk about and what, the important issues and my ability to sell services and be at the mercy of clients, okay, who will just suddenly, like I've got a cancellation clause in my contract, but at the same time, because I'm in the business of branding, I don't want to take anyone down with me, like it's not fair, right? That's just not ethical. It's not the right thing to do. So, the work that I do, I will do quietly, right? I don't. So I can't keep a public portfolio. I can't talk about clients. I can't share my work. That's and also because I reached a point where most of my work was under NDA anyway. I don't really talk about it, but it's the same. But you've got a body of work. But it's also the fact that, again, people just want to see a fucking pamphlet. They want to see the pamphlet version, not see someone's inherent value without all of these markers and labels and accomplishments. And if I'm honest with you, I've been thinking about this honestly for the last 2 weeks or so. Since uni went on break, I'm taking a break for the rest of the year to really just figure out and wait for the universe to tell me what my next step is. Because that's, again, obviously not wait for the universe, but, just, and I found that if you sit back and you just keep plugging away, that opportunities will present themselves. It's always been, if I sit back and I am paying attention to the messages and what I'm getting about what my path is, it usually comes to me. And it did yesterday, which is good. But I've actually realized that a PhD is actually a step down for me in terms of my work and IP, because first of all, I'm held to a standard where I have to write things that only academics will read, which means that I won't reach the ordinary person, okay? It confronts academia about the fucking disgraceful and everyone's contribution to the problem. I have to pay, it's $100,000 minimum. If I don't get a scholarship, then it's $100,000, okay, in debt, to write something that isn't really my own words, that is subject to sort of all of these like requirements and edited and rigid. It will be a worse version. My PhD would be a worse version of a book, because when it's a book, I can write in my style. I can say things. I can sort of, write slightly more creative language. I can make it more accessible, make it funny, all that stuff. And I'm more into the storytelling part of things than the academic part. So, I was talking to Paul about this, and he said, well, I think most people, as long as you've got a hard copy book, if you go, here's my book, people will pretend to read my book. They'll read the first few pages, go, oh yeah, I read that. That's what most people do. You give them a copy, they pretend to read it, and they put it on their stack of books, and then they say they read the book. That's what most people do. And then you're an author. And then, yeah, so I think that, again, it's not, and but a lot of that is also the flip side, which is that's unfortunately how the world works, which is that perception and branding and how you present and how you sell yourself is actually more important than the substance of what you say. And that's, because I'm somebody who's like, ask anyone, one of the reasons why I had the reputation I did, which was that I was the person that you called when everything broke or things were dysfunctional, or, the project wasn't running smoothly, or they were having difficulty with a certain client, or something had fallen apart, or, I was kind of that person, because what I am is a root cause person. I like things running smoothly, and I pay attention, again, to the gaps. I pay attention to, and that applied in my website work and UX work as well, which is that if we were delivering a product or delivering a website or delivering something, I would not put it out at a standard that, reflected poorly on me in the long term. And so people will say a lot about my mouth, a lot about the fact that my behavior, but if a client relation, I'm also notorious for firing clients, okay? I fire a lot of people, and just don't refuse, and I say no to a lot of people who I don't want to work with because I don't think that they're coachable. And that's another thing where I may have a reputation out there for being a bit like I drop people or whatever, which I don't. I just don't. I set boundaries and that sort of stuff, and I have a standard. And that was what I actually came to. And this is what comes back to what I was going to talk about actually, which is that in what year was it? Hang on. This was 2018 when the agency rebranded and we were just hiring staff. And I had a vision for what I wanted to do. And I wanted to do it. And I was like, be the change you want to see, right? Model this behavior. Use, stop moaning about the industry and start. I mean, I've always freelanced, I've always done that, but stop moaning about the industry. Why don't you create an agency that is the way that you want it to be? Okay. And I think I was naive and I underestimated that. And this is why you've probably seen me on a journey where I had to come to accept that my industry was unfixable, and that trying to sell the services and trying to sell consulting, and trying to sell, because at the end of the day, when people are in crisis with a project or need a consult or anything like that, usually the money's run out for a start. And second of all, people really aren't willing to, okay. When I've had a consulting job or whatever, usually I've been brought in as a consultant and a darling, and they go, tell us what's wrong, and you do an audit. And then they don't like that. When it's them, that's the problem. So like there was an instance where I worked at a tech company, and I was supposed to build up their marketing department and attract staff and that sort of stuff, right? And build job descriptions. And, that was something that, I would do. Is like be an interim CMO, hire my replacement, build out the team, all that sort of stuff. But very quickly I identified massive cultural problems where they couldn't hire women because it was just so poisonous because of one particular employee that was just a bully, and he made it utterly unpleasant. And the CEO allowed it to happen, and he was friends, and he's like, I've got a soft spot for this kid. Yes, he's, rough around the edges, but, and I was like, no, he's a bully and this culture is poisonous. Okay. And the CEO allowed, and then, like the person that was supposed to be like a primary stakeholder was like the king of mansplaining, and he would just derail. So I could never actually get any fucking work done because I was too busy dealing with this fuck. And they hired me under one pretense, which was that, and then they started giving me busy work and all that stuff. So eventually it became, well, my findings are that this is actually, it's not about hiring the staff, but you've actually got a culture problem and you need to work on yourself. Okay, and that fell apart because I told him what he didn't want to hear. Okay, so you know that was something that I realized, that people don't want to pay to be told what they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear the truth. They want to hear the truth, which is here's the budget, sir. Not you've created a culture that is absolutely toxic and nobody in their right mind would want to work with you. Okay, so anyway, those weren't my words, but it was, that was the conclusion. But so basically, what you're seeing happen and evolve is, and this comes back to what we were saying about that inner struggle. I'm always in conflict. And I had this conversation with a client that I've got where she said, you give out mixed messages about whether you want clients or not. And I said, yes, because that conflict comes out. I'm living that conflict constantly because the industry is just at such a, even if I tried to, I've still got a couple of clients, right? And even if I tried to hand them off, I can't find somebody in my industry who gives a fuck and will actually do it at the right price, do it to my standard, and also do it ethically, and someone that I would feel comfortable handing them to. I can't quit because I couldn't hand them over. Okay. And that was really funny and very weird. So I'm kind of still, and also I need to eat, I need to live. Our rent is double what it was a year ago. And it's just, I'm being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. So I've just faced the fact that I'm just going to have to give up something and try to find a way to monetize. And that's just, it's easier to build a website for whatever than it is, as much as I hate it. Because that's what I started doing 20 years ago. I'm sick of building websites. But at the end of the day, it's the only really ethical, production work is the only ethical thing that I can do, and talk about politics, okay? Because otherwise, if I'm sort of exposing my clients to this shit, then, anyway. So that's what you're seeing, because I wrote this in 2018, right? Which is an article, which is funny because I was a business owner and political, but I was also this was 2018, and this was actually funny because I'd been observing the gender. I was sort of in the gender thing, but observing it, but kind of not really out, right? Not really as a TERF, right? I wasn't on the list. I wasn't out talking about this sort of culture war stuff. I was just sort of observing it, right? So I started thinking about it, which is called, should business owners talk about politics on social media? Okay. Ignore that. That's just, I've put placeholder images in there. I've got to audit all my content, but I'm going through it, right? But it's basically, an essay. It was I've seen a few comments and posts on LinkedIn that we shouldn't talk about politics on LinkedIn, okay, which I find interesting. And that was kind of where I was at, because I was at a point where I'm a political scientist. I want to talk about politics, but I'm stuck, okay? But hi, just see you alive. Yeah, Judith, I'm just actually getting to the point. So it's good timing. Let me just put some lipstick on because my mouth is crusty. Hang on. There we go. I'm looking all gross. There we go. But I wrote this 2018 because there was a point where I think I was seeing it, and I've always been frustrated. If you read some of my older stuff, I've always been highly critical of the digital industry and where we're heading and the attitude of agencies and stuff. Now, what I realized sort of 10 years ago that if I didn't shut up, I wouldn't eat and I wouldn't pay my rent and shit, right? And what happened when I got sick was that I was just laid on my ass for 3 months, and I started to go, look, Paul, I'm unhappy. This industry is fucked. And so he decided to go get because we were, business partners. The agency was going well, but I just couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I wanted to talk, and I was feeling stifled. And I was in a business where it used to be creative, but now it was just sort of like assembly, like a jigsaw puzzle, like paint by numbers kind of stuff. And saw the writing on the wall years ago, and I was just miserable. This Kintsugi was my last ditch attempt to try and inject some change into the industry, and it just got worse. I had to accept that I had to like not be able to change it. I can't change it, and that's the thing where I go, we're a bit naive, and this is what I want to talk about with the, why go a bit easier on people who don't talk about political shit, because people got to eat. They're trapped, and I was trapped, and I think, again, if you put some class analysis into this, it's easy to turn around and say, I destroyed my life and I suffered, therefore I think that everyone should. And yes, I understand that if this reaches a critical mass, which I think it is, I think I've talked, you can not talk publicly and still lobby behind the scenes, and that's probably more effective, but I'll talk about that later. There's different types of influence, and this is the problem with the word influencer, is that ironically, influencers are the least fucking influential people that exist. Okay? That's the thing. Even politicians aren't that influential. Right? You don't actually do policy as a politician. Okay? You do numbers. Hang on. There we go. Sorry, my mouth's all working. But, okay, so this was where I was at, which is that I was like, no, I think we should talk about. So this was still sort of, sunk costs, still thinking that I could persuade people that business can be done differently. I was talking about this before that fucking CEO, Dan, what's his name? He's all famous. And again, this is the difference between a billionaire bro and me, which is fucking, I was talking about this stuff for years. He gets rich and says, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. And gets all the fucking praise. It's like, yeah. And then he gets praised as the architect. It's like, yeah, fuck off, you did. Anyway, so, I think, but basically I wrote this, it's quite interesting to go back to it, right? Because I said politics, right, particularly in the current climate, has a bad rap. That's impolite. And I was trying to make the case for, so for me, I believe that business, over the years I thought, well, politics, you can't influence anything. At least with business, I can be free to speak. I can do what I want to do. I can create. I can help people, all that stuff. That's what I saw with digital early on. And that fucking changed, didn't it? Because then I became a soulless corporate fucking monster who realized sort of that it had shifted, and I couldn't speak without losing everything. And I did lose everything in the end. Broke as fuck. Okay. But that's okay. But I'm just saying that there is a cost associated with it, and it's just an interesting thing to see this stuff now where my head was at and that I was already stuck. So let's go. So how is politics related to running a digital agency? I won't read the whole thing. Okay. But when I tell people that I'm a politics grad who fell into the web, they seem confused. Like, to me, they've always been the same thing. Okay. It's why I saw what I saw. I predicted that Cambridge Analytica would occur. I predicted, Trump. I predicted all of this stuff. And I believe that, politics is not only, politics and business. If you're running a business, you're running a business in line with your values. And if you're a good faith political participant, your politics reflects your values too. Okay. If you're honest with yourself. If you do a political compass quiz and you actually, it's about like your beliefs about who you are, I believe that your politics is actually your behavior, because your behavior represents your values when you're actually faced with a problem, not a hypothetical where you might. And that's what I think we're seeing with these, these fucking like left libertarian like types where, yeah, on a political compass, you'll score with that. You will. But when you're actually under stress, same thing as shadow types. I would imagine that your political compass has a shadow type too, which is in a situation where it's not the way that you want it to be, or if you're under stress, or if you're under, it's crazy times, or, you're in a fight, a political argument, you're doubling down and you're saying shit you don't mean it's more complicated. So using the political compass as some sort of fucking, like, it's as useful as the MBTI, okay? It's more complicated than that. But largely politics reflects your values. Okay, but politics, I believe, is behavior and how you act in when presented with the cleavage. Okay, in the cleavage, which side do you take? Okay, how do you behave and conduct yourself in the conflicts? And that's why we're seeing all these bros unmask themselves as misogynists. Okay, because they, on the political compass quiz, they're like, women should have all these rights and all that stuff, because they know that it's the right thing to say if you're left wing. Okay, that's the problem with self-report and psych tests as well. It's the same thing, which is, this is a whole other topic. I could talk about this. But, the problem with self-report is that we tend to have a glowing view of ourselves in an ideal situation when we're filling it out. Okay, not based on our behavior and how we affect others. I think if others do that's why with ADHD diagnosis, it's interesting because a big part of that diagnosis is other people, because we're the hero of our own stories in ADHD, right? And also because there's an overlap with other mental illness. Talking to families can often help diagnosis because, how you are. Again, I've had to accept that I'm an asshole to some people. I like to think my intentions are good, but often, that's not the case. You end up inadvertently being the abuser, right? You don't know this. And that's where learning and self-awareness and self-actualization and owning your shit and owning your own behavior is a good thing. And I just happen to have done it all online in public and navigated this stuff. But basically, I started to make the case that business was political, which is what we're seeing now is the woke shit. Because I was actually a part of one of those voices and one of those people that was writing about how business is that, we have a responsibility to do things differently and, corporate social responsibility and all that sort of stuff. And it is okay to talk about politics on social media because I think that, business is an inherently capitalist system, which is political. It's not just economics, okay? But as a female in tech, a woman in tech, there's a certain political context to what I'm trying to do. Being isolated in Perth in Australia and not in Silicon Valley, that's political, okay? That there's American dominance and bro culture, and there's a whole political, economic dynamic to especially the tech business that people sort of, it's like, well, it's not irrelevant, it's completely relevant. And if you'd listened to me about that years ago, we might have actually fixed some of these problems early on in terms of our responsibility to people, okay? And this is where I think the narrative that business isn't political actually really fucking caused a lot of this stuff, where it was impolite to talk about politics if you owned a business. Or if it was impolite, it was inappropriate, or it was it exposed you. Okay, and that's kind of the problem, which is that if we'd had this conversation earlier out loud, then this woke shit wouldn't have taken hold the way that it did, in my view. But I was trying to build a business that had, that was not just a pink collar social media like girl business, but a legitimate tech company that was run by women, employed women, was merit based, and all of those sorts of things. No one was interested. I'd still have Paul as my fucking tech lead. I was in charge. I was the MD, and I would have all of the male clients address Paul like he was my boss. Okay, you can't change that. That's political. Okay, and that was my entire career. I remember I was GM of an agency, and I had the intern with me taking notes, and the client would talk to the fucking intern. Like, this is a real thing that people don't see. And Paul didn't even see it until I pointed it out, and then he's like, holy shit. Like, I had no idea this. It's like, yes, I know. This is my life. This is my day. Okay. Every day, fellas, if you fucking see, you'll just look at who the men talk to in meetings and how much. And then if a woman has to assert herself or like set a hard boundary, she's a bitch and like all of that stuff. It's astonishing once you see it. That's the microaggressions that everyone's talking about, okay? But also that stuff is used as a weapon, okay, by employers to sack you at will, okay, legally, without you suing them. It's not unfair dismissal if you've done something wrong, and they just try to find something wrong. So, but also, deeply committed, like my favourite person in the world. She'd been in a relationship and a mum for years, and I offered her a job. She hadn't been in the workplace. She fucking shined. She was brilliant. 4-day work week. Kids come first. Okay, if your kids call, you answer the phone. You're never too busy for them. We'll figure it out later. Like, that's just values, right? I tried to do this, and wouldn't do it. They didn't care. All right, couldn't compete. And yeah, so all that sort of stuff, and being open and honest with clients, being self-aware, not bullshitting people, not selling them stuff and not delivering on it. not because the problem is that I also, when pitching, had to compete with people that were promising shit that I knew they couldn't deliver at the price because, again, I know what things cost. So telling clients and going, like, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to offshore. If you want me to offshore, then first of all, you got to pay more for project management because offshoring requires micromanagement, and a lot more. Like, you're going to pay some way. There's no one promising you a better price. Okay, things cost what they cost in digital, and I was constantly fighting against that. Then you got ad fraud, click fraud, fucking scammers, black hat people who are promising leads, black agencies that sort of take customers' leads and like from all of their customers and put that into one master list that they then sell to other agencies as a lead generation. That's their real fucking money. And it's like, okay, this is what I'm up against. And like that's ultimately why I burnt out, because you burn out trying. Okay. So this is, but again, to pour politics onto that, I still spoke out. I'll tell you that. I still spoke out because I thought, again, I said in that blog post I wrote the other day, I said that I vastly underestimated this. And I'm a pro. I'm a pro internet arguer. If there's one thing that I am good at is arguing on the fucking internet. I'm a fucking troll. And I underestimated the impact of this. I thought, first of all, I had more social capital than I did. I didn't know that how conditional my friendships were on me agreeing. I had no idea how toxic like this stuff was. And I've been on the internet for this, again, I've been on the internet forever. I've seen it all. And this is a fucking toxic, hard, brutal conversation with a massive cost to it. And that's what I'm saying. So, like, don't forget that this is 2 years ago, okay? 2018. No, 3 years ago, sorry, fucking time. 3 years ago, I was going, okay, common wisdom is that you don't talk about politics on social media, okay, in business. In the business world, in small business world, you don't do it. It's not appropriate. And then obviously at some point that fucking shifted and everyone's gone batshit to the point where I wish they wouldn't talk about politics. But, I'm just saying that this is I think we need to make sure that history is accurate and history is kind, that some of these concepts are new, and also the risk of speaking out, which is that there is a real penalty attached to stuff like this. Okay. So to be more, and I have meetings all the time with people, all parts of life, all sorts. Everyone agrees that this has gone batshit. And I think a lot of people like me thought it was just the comment section, thought it was crazy people on the internet. Okay. It was the FetLife fucks gone mainstream for a bit and there'd be pushback. I didn't expect this to go as far in legislation as it did, but that's a very complex thing to unravel. And I think that the way that you can make a difference is like the way it was handled in UWA, in Western Australia when self-ID came through, which was at the consultation phase. You organise, you write the arguments at the consultation phase, and it goes in the water. You rally support from various people, especially the money. The one thing I want to try and do is try to get the TERF some more money, but so that people are free to speak out. But again, if you don't take care of people's material well-being, they're not in a position. Most people would say, okay, well, most people are fucking broke as fuck right now. Okay. It's getting more, I've been poor. Okay. I've been all sorts of poor and I've had money. Okay. And $100,000 a year doesn't go where it used to go anymore. Like, cause the rent goes up, the cost of living. So fear is the mind killer said, like a lot of us did it. I wrote it off as fringe crazies until some of my best friends started repeating. Yes. And and I think for me, it was more of a blind spot for longer because I was used to fucking arguing on the internet. And I just put this down as just another religious war between, cleavages, right? Literally in this case. But, it was Emacs versus Vim, if you're a geek, Mac versus PC. I put it down to that, it was just yet another big religious, internet religious war. It was only with the Bill C-16 and getting like that and Vancouver rape relief that was really that where I was like, fuck, where are the adults? Oh, fuck, I'm the adult. shit, maybe I should have spent less time arguing on the internet and more time paying attention to this. And that's sort of what happened. And since then, and also I started to see that like a bunch of my daughter's friends were now fucking non-binary and trans and shit, and also first coming out as non-binary, and that sort of, you know, then suddenly beside seeing the sort of social capital that they got out of that. And I also noticed again a pattern with the woke shit. Again, I put it down to crazes online, and you know why that is. And I'll talk about this, which is that this is another video where I want to talk about personas, but it was literally the exact same people 10 years before who, when Are You OK Day first started, or, you know, like mental health awareness, or the spoon theory, or, you know, the spoon theory is, you know, all of these things. It was the same people that would jump from that to that. So suddenly when the spoon theory came out, everyone had lupus. And, you know, I actually was suffering from autoimmune disease. I was diagnosed with lupus briefly, but then discovered that I had celiac disease. And then, yeah, but, you know, I've got a bunch of stuff going on, but, you know, but there was always those people that would be misusing good things. Like the spoon theory is a great story for how, you know, what it's like to, you know, live with chronic illness. But then people started to use it for attention and use it for, you know, social capital and all that stuff. It was the same people. And you know what's actually really funny is that I thought of some of these people and I went onto their Instagram, and I, like, you know, because I'd have fisticuffs with them over the years, and, you know, you drift away from certain internet people. And I'm going to check in on this person. And they're literally like a stereotype. They've got blue, aqua, green, turquoise hair, or, you know, whatever. You know, cat eye, fucking this, over the top, like clown makeup. I'm wearing makeup today. Look, it all cakes on too. That's why I don't wear it, because I like just fucking whatever. I don't have, anyway. But, you know, like that whole LARPing thing, you know, the stripy socks. It's just like, it's just like, holy shit, you're a brand. Like, do you not understand what's happened to you is that you've been, it's brand psychology, it's brand marketing, like the manic panic. It's like wow, you're a teenager, but it was the same people who were like more depressed than everyone else, you know, suffering more than anyone else, middle class, right? You know, using feminist arguments, you know, to fucking, you know, justify never changing themselves when dating, or never learning about their patterns or doing actual work. It was the same. And that was what I realized sort of, I started to see sort of the internet trends go down. And you're seeing this on, you know, the TikTok. It's like, yeah, it's going to be that portion of the population that just fucking cosplay. And they do whatever they need to do to get whatever clicks or whatever attention they need to do. It's just that I've watched them for the last 10 years try different things, you know, and it's like, yeah. But I looked them up. The kids are trans, kids are non-binary, they've got blue hair. And I went, okay, I'm in branding, I'm in marketing. Holy shit, this is targeted. And that was why I started to go, this is not organic, because, you know, one thing, you know, if you're involved in politics is that the left is very diverse and has a, you know, it's also, yeah, it's just, it's bizarre. And it's actually really funny, the idea that, you know, it's just the social contagion around the brightly coloured hair is funny to me, because it just, for some reason, I fixate on that. Like, America thought, the CIA thought, this is, you know, like Boomer's idea of cool is that what we'll do is because, you know, when you're in politics and you see all these young people, right, and you go, when you're old, when you live through stuff and you've been to conferences, the green hairs were always there. They were always there. But they were sort of the fringe. But because when I was involved in like the NUS and like Labor and stuff, at NUS, I was in Labor, I was in Unity, which was an ally with the sort of ALP, the Labor, Young Labor, but Labor was split into factions. So Young Labor, okay, at NUS, the National Union of Students Conference and stuff, when I was a student politician, the Labor Party would split in two, okay, because the left faction of the Labor Party would go off with the trots and the fucking full on and the Greens and like the full on, but they were all, and I saw this early, they were all They were all kids of corporate lawyers, fucking rich kids. They all had like designer shit, but they all had like really colourful hair, expensive hair. They wore clogs. I always was obsessed. There was this one woman. She had fucking cherry red hair and green clogs. And I was and stripy socks. And this was 1998, 1999. So but what I find funny is that sort of the centre left, centre and right factions of the ALP, which are still, social democrat, they were more sort of working class, but we teamed up with the Liberals, the young Liberals, and they were pricks. Like they showed up to fuck shit up. If you've worked with and they're conservatives, they're like young Tories, right? If you're a young conservative, there's something wrong with you. But I'm just saying, right, there's, again, you got to understand that there's not just the party system, but there's the factions underneath, and then there's the alliances and the complex interrelations between things and history. But what I find funny is that this is what I think might have happened, which was that in the student conferences, okay, there was this sort of divide where the left and the trots and the fucking tankies and all those people were so fucking batshit because they would just scream at everybody, and they were rich kids that screamed at everybody, right? There weren't very many actual working class. So I still just was like, no, you just fit in. Again, that's that working class guilt of like, you got to try and sort of integrate with the middle class. Now I go, fuck you, right? I don't care, but I'm older. But when you're young, you just want to kind of be accepted. That's that sort of, that's that Bourdieu like critique of like the middle class, which is that, there's that portion of the working class, especially when you go to university, that you kind of desperately crave the acceptance of the elites. Like that's, and I've gone through that. But so basically, most of the working class kids are over in sort of the moderate, but we're attached to the Liberals. But what we saw happen at this conference was that the trots would go off and go fucking crazy, okay, and have these get drunk and start like shit with us. And the Libs would be provoking, the Liberals, conservatives would be provoking them, right? And so there'd be this all-out war between the fucking trots and the Liberals, and we'd be sort of stuck in the middle. And basically what I feel might have happened was that the young Libs, because their job is basically to report back to the grown-ups on what's going on in student politics, and having like this strategy of sort of taking over the guilds and taking over things so that they can dismantle them. That happened to my university when I was education vice president. That's what happened to university. We were famously the first student guild to like become insolvent, okay, involuntary insolvency after privatization of universities. But what I think actually happened here, and this is not related to anything that I plan to talk about, but we're just whatever. Was that they just reported back that all the legitimate real left-wing tankies have green hair. And somewhere along the line with Chinese whispers, it just got back to the CIA. And, the radicals, they have colourful hair. I don't like their colourful hair. Why can't they just have normal hair? And somewhere along the line, over time, they just, that boomer idea, hello, fellow children. And so they've sort of taken over the left. And that's become a symbol of what it means to be a radical. It's funny. And then it became fucking a marketing campaign in a costume. Again, it's just funny to think about these things when you understand sort of, and you've seen the history where the misunderstandings occur. Again, fun's in the gaps. The fun's in wondering what happened between, when in the ditch, what happened in the gaps in the front. And this is why I want to write a book about being nobody, because everyone writes history and writes books and puts on Wikipedia people they're not in the gaps. Someone will write a book about famous people. Someone will write a book about, like prominent journalists' perspectives on things. Academics they've got the platform. I'm writing this as somebody who is nobody, who has interacted with these things and has a position on it that will be left out of history if we don't talk about it. And that's sort of the beauty of social media as well. That's the flip side of it. But the problem is that we're also not public figures, but we act like it and we don't realize we're public figures, and we're going to fuck up because, I've been on a 27-year journey, 42 years if you count my life. And it's a journey and it's a lesson and it's experience, and you're going to fuck up. And this is where we haven't fully integrated, the internet. I think it's roughly the same kind of growing pains that, every sort of the Industrial Revolution had, and even Victorian times, Victorian England, there was this growing pains and class stuff and stuff to tease out. But overall, over time, Wikipedia gets relegated to sort of I look it up because every year that I'm sort of writing in the book that I refer to, there's a little bit of context, which is, and so I've been going to Wikipedia looking at what happened that year, and it's very interesting to see my birth year sort of distilled. I was born, I'm not on there, I was left out. Okay, but, there was funny shit that happened. But seeing a year, sort of as a list of events that happened, okay, and what people feel is important in those events, what you'll see is that it was war, chaos, disease, virtue signaling from celebrities, celebrity charity events, war, imperialism, conflict, and everything's a bit fucked, disease, outbreaks, and events, hurricanes, natural disasters every year. Celebrity virtue signaling, UNICEF, rock the vote, music aid. It's the same shit. But the problem is that, in 1979, it happened in real time to other people, to ordinary people as well. But ordinary people didn't get, all we see from those years is the list of events that happened. But now we see all of those events unfolding in real time, as well as the other events that aren't reported. And so, there's a fire hose constantly, all the time, of everyone's story being left in history. I mean, that has a benefit to it. There's a good side to that, which is that stories don't get left out. And I've always said that, love me, hate me, cancel me, delete me, whatever. I'm there on record, okay, as having tried my best and learned from my mistakes and sort of unwittingly thought that the internet was secret, like I said last time, to sort of, now being so self-conscious about anything that I say, and even just being actively hated and disliked for who I am and what I am. So to go from somewhere where your identity was irrelevant to where identity was everything, and to where you were free to speak and free to have thoughts and free to express yourself, to not being able to express yourself at all, and there being a new conversation that you can't say that because that's public. That's a shift. That's a shift. It's a big fucking shift, and it's a part of history that is being left out, and that's the theme of the book, as I've talked about. And that's been my life and my experience. But I'm doing it through the experience of being nobody. I'm not writing a book because I think I'm somebody. I'm writing a book because I am nobody. And that's kind of the point. But yeah, anyway, so I was sharing this article, but under capitalism, right? So starting a business based on kindness is a political act. And that's, again, let's just, I'll share the link, but you don't want to read it. I've fucking talked way too long, but that's all right. I'm going to keep going if there's people here. Fun. So Fear is the Mind Killer said, yeah, I wrote it off as fringe crazies until some of my best friends, sorry, last one. I'm most tickled when the hair dye comes right after the NB. And when you see it, this is some of the IP and this is the stuff that I'm writing about. And unfortunately, when you have to write, the problem with writing to standards and trying to be correct is that it just is time consuming. Like when I write something, I want to make sure that it's the opposite of simple, which is that I know what I'm talking about. I know I'm correct. I've been had before. I've made mistakes before. I've been wrong before. So I have a duty to make sure that what I say is correct, or at least someone's perception of correct. Okay, which is, for me, it's that sort of anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist view. Okay, well, critique of imperialism, critique of capitalism. I don't position myself against things. I position myself for things. That's I'm not a destroyer. I'm a builder. And that comes back to the language. I'm not anti anything, because I believe being anti something makes you righteous, and righteous makes you dangerous. And being anti something is exactly the point of all of this sort of social media stuff. It hardwires you to think that you are against that thing, which is out-group psychology, which means that it justifies. It's the first point to rationalizing it. So saying you're anti-racist, okay, It's a trick of language. That's why it's obviously it's a polarizing linguistic trick. Okay. And this is the stuff that I want to talk about with people who actually can challenge this, which is people in comms and people in marketing. And it's like, okay, let's think about the language that we're using. Are we like, this is a blind spot for marketers over the years, digital marketers. And I've talked about this before. I ran a course on polarization and how you can utilize it. Okay. So I've said this before, like KFC, I've talked about this before with KFC, how they know who their customers aren't. They know how to use the outrage machine to their advantage. Okay. So they say something like trolling for marketing is, it's clever. It's good, clever marketing. However, in the context right now, I think because there's political outcomes and people aren't necessarily, I think Coke versus Pepsi is the problem. And so therefore having any kind of argument that stokes the flames of anything like Coke versus Pepsi or, Max versus Vim or women, I just think that stoking the flames of division and being anti anything, okay, and being more about values, principles and charity towards people, it's hard. Like I said, I started a business with these principles and it failed. But it's all you can do to stay right and be a good person and live again and win the story of your life, because this is the reality, okay? This is what I'm saying about speaking out. When you speak out about it, okay, someone's using it. Someone's going to use it. I've talked about that before I'll be talking about this quite a bit. And this is what I've been thinking about, which is that, I think it's not only about the political outcome or policy outcome that you may be unintentionally serving. Like for me, seeing the effect, the way that this argument is used, this critical theory boogeyman, which is a boogeyman, okay? Because it's just, like I said, oh God, this was a year ago? That it's just a fire, it's a controlled burn that's jumped the road, and like people are still arguing as if they're in a university when it can jump the road and fucking burn the town down. It's like it's not the theory. It's just that people have access to the theories and can use it and misunderstand it. And they think that Judith Butler is a fucking doctor. They don't understand the difference between a PhD and a medical and science. Okay, they don't understand. They think it's just dumbasses, dumb and crazy. Okay, that's still true. Dumb and crazy is still true, but unfortunately, okay, I think it's just there's a persuasion and marketing and lobbying going on in the background. It's opportunist. Again, these are forces that are big. Okay, and again, it's not about conspiracy. This is just if you study international relations, you understand power, you understand politics. Really, you go, okay, I see how this happened, and that's what I'd like to try and work on. Is rather than here's a counter narrative that's more interesting and actually correct. That isn't a conspiracy theory. It's just it's a little more complicated, and it doesn't. It's a little more complicated. It's more class based. It's more challenging, especially if you are sort of more pro-capitalist and getting into the thick of it. But at the end of the day, we're all pawns for this stuff, and we're all being used for a sort of a marketing goal or a funnel or a radicalization funnel, and in politics, being recruited to a side that is looking like it's going to war. Okay, let's be honest. Let's just talk about the elephant in the room. It's just pro-war shit, but they're recruiting armies. Okay, through this stuff. And it's the same thing the very same technology that sold us, the right brand of soap for all of our, or sold us contextually sold us the shoes we always wanted at a discount and remarketed it to us because we clicked on the link and we weren't ready to shop yet. But then, we saw the ad again and it offered us a discount. And we went, oh yeah, okay, I could be nudged to buy that. That same methodology and psychology is applied to politics and farmer and, all that sort of stuff. And also another thing, a more cynical thing, which is, radicalizing people so that they get out in the streets so that government can pass fucking legislation that gives them power to securitize citizens. I find that very, very alarming. As much as I make fun of it, it's like Australia's not fucking but it's like, this is far more interesting to me. The truth is far more interesting than any fucking batshit conspiracy theory. I don't know why people like Marvel movies. It's like we live in one, and it's like all you got to do is just read a bit more and like be willing to sort of humbly be wrong and realize that maybe, you're being manipulated into a certain thing. And that's why when I talk about ending up on a list, that's what I mean, which is that when I went into this thing, I had a reputation for being a bit of a fuckwit because I'm a mouthy bitch and I've got opinions on things and I'm good at what I do. Okay. And I could always, I've got this thing, I wrote a bit, I've got it in my notes from years ago, but I never published, and it's like the sort of the asshole competent, like the hot crazy graph, that thing. I did a asshole competent one, which is that and that's with developers or with people in tech, which is that you can be an asshole if you're good at what you do. But you can't be an asshole if you're not good at what you do. So it's like the kind of hot crazy thing. And I was just repurposing that. And because it was kind of like a dig at the engineer bros who aren't very good at code, but have all the arrogance of someone who is good at code. And so for me, I was like, well, you can think I'm rude all you like, but I'm competent and I'm good. And that's all I care about, is that I fight for the right thing for my clients, and they might not like what I have to say sometimes, or it might be, oh my God, I think that's a big problem in advertising, is that because clients hold too much power, a good client services person or a good project manager will be able to say no to the client and say, no, that's a bad idea, and not just take their money and try to execute it and, execute poorly. Like, that's something that you do. Again, that's just something that I believe is different and counter to, it turns out clients just want to buy a thing and not think about it anymore. But that's okay, because they don't give a fuck about their jobs or anything. No one cares about anything. That's the thing. We're all so fucking unhappy right now that no one cares. They just want the result. They want to tick the box. And that's the same thing for a degree, and it's the same thing for university. It's like no one engages and cares the way that sort of thinkers used to. Like, they care and they love people. And I just love people. I love the internet. It fucking infuriates me. It's the most toxic relationship I've ever had, is the internet, okay? Which is that it's got lots of good points and lots of bad points, okay? But I love it. And I want to fix it, and I want to, all of those sorts of things. And everything I do, I love to death. I love, in a crazy way. So, I had that reputation. And even then with this, I miscalculated how afraid people were of sort of talking about this issue. And obviously that I had no idea of the sort of power that was behind it and what was actually happening behind the scenes. And that, I think brick by brick, a generation of teenagers was sort of quietly lecturing their parents in the lounge room about transphobia and all of this stuff, right? I think that they were sort of being radicalized, or they were seeing their sort of sons sort of, become sort of edgelord, racist, sexist, and sort of wanted to try and steer them on the right track. And so they hadn't, like me, it never occurred to me that there was a cleavage there, or a fault line. It's just, you can't know everything. And it just wasn't something that but once I had sort of the discussion, I go, well, I hadn't thought about it. This is what I like to do, is that if you watch my stuff, it's not my job to tell you like stuff. I can tell you how stuff works roughly, but it's not I want to just be one of those people that inspires you to go, I hadn't considered that maybe this was not the right path, or I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. I'm not going to tell you that, I'm not going to lecture anyone or judge. I'll make jokes, because you have to build straw men if you're talking and stuff. But, we deal with caricatures all the time. It just would be you'd be unworkable if I was actually, I had an idea for a comedy bit that was basically one joke, but it took fucking 35 minutes to qualify the joke before I did the joke, and then it wasn't even a very good joke. Yeah, it ruins the joke. It's an excellent joke, but it ruins the joke. Again, simplicity is in conflict with correctness a lot of the time, which is that you have to this is why Twitter is such a fucking dumpster fire, because there's no way you can be understood because one of my frustrations, and I know that, like, the person who does it I love and they're very clever, but they don't seem to get that it's Twitter and that you need to use economy and you need to use generalizations and general language. And what will happen is they'll show up in my replies and say, oh, you left out XYZ fucking nuanced thing. I was like, yeah, I know, because I had 280 characters and I used a word to conjure up an image. It's like, that's how language, it's like, this is what academics, this is why academics are fucking annoying and ineffective, because they write for other academics and they qualify everything and they are paid to do that. They're not incentivized to be understood. They're incentivized to put stuff out that gets the approval of other academics. Okay, and it becomes impenetrable, and that's why I oppose jargon. I can speak it. I can explain what certain words mean. Like, you won't hear me sort of stumbling on any terminology and what things mean or the overall meaning of things. But, you know, plain language is one of my favorite books is Plain Language for Lawyers that I've read in law school, and it was something that they're pushing in law schools now, which is that you've got to write contracts in plain language. This is how we got here with this terms of service stuff. Okay, love or hate Twitter, they're clear in their language, and that, you know, that they make a commitment to making, like, the terms of service clear, not try to hide it all, you know, under sort of commas and fucking, you know, hithertos and wherefores and all that shit. Okay, people don't. It's just, yeah. Anyway, but that's another problem. Is, like I said, there's this elitist view. This is why I love Jessica Taylor, because she's like, fuck it, I'm working class. No, I write to be understood by mainstream. I don't, you know, I love that about her. She's great. I think she's doing fabulous work. Do check out her books, or book, sorry. She's got workbooks and stuff as well. But she's someone who kind of, I kind of started to think that I could make a difference in psychology. But then I was like, I think I'm better off fighting the fight that I am already prepared to fight. And also, I don't like listening to other people talk, as you can see. Anyway, we're just chatting. But I've gone on way too long. But it is frustrating when academics on Twitter, because it's almost like they are waiting for their turn to speak, not really trying to understand what people mean. And there's a whole elitism with academia. It comes back to the PhD, which is that ultimately I've got the same life's work, but to do a PhD, it would be a shitter version of a book that fewer people would read because it would be impenetrable. And then I'd have a whole bunch of academics picking it apart rather than it being sort of the target audience is everyday people thinking about sort of what they share and expanding the minds of sort of just people who like ideas and reading and thinking, you know. So I think that I just need to let go of that status and hope that I get gifted a PhD for my contribution one day. I don't know. Just hope for that. But yeah, anyway, I can't remember what my point was. Yeah, so Fear is the Mind Killer said, never occurred to me like how responsible people let this happen. Now, I know how. So I'm going to try and apply this to how you would run a marketing campaign. And what it was, it's an omni-channel, long-term, it's called omni-channel marketing. And in marketing, this is what I said, where marketing fused with politics and lobbying, which is that they saw this omni-channel approach to persuasion and political persuasion, which is that it was run. So there's this thing called touch points, okay, in user experience design. And what you do is you map these touch points. So this is when I want to do a thing on personas and stuff, right? And this is why I think running a course on this for marketers around ethics is important, because this is kind of a cat out of the bag situation where it's a sort of, it's like that snowflake model in the organizer's handbook that I talked about. That's kind of where, like, marketing fused with political causes. It needs pause, and it needs to be sort of illegal. It needs to be sort of cast to the sort of scams. It needs to be considered illegal and unethical. So in marketing, it's like so the internet allowed for omni-channel marketing, which is that, so when in user experience, what you'll do is you'll map everyone's journey throughout the day. So you'll who's my perfect ideal customer? Okay, so let's say customer and interchange that. Let's say they're a mark, political mark, okay? Who's my target market? Young girls who may or may not be autistic, but they spend a lot of time online. They're middle class. They hang out on Tumblr. Okay, they can, what's their education level? What's their literacy level? What kind of stuff, are they smart or are they critical? Are they, all that sort of stuff. They've already got insights. They call it insights in marketing, insights on these groups. And what you do is the first thing that you do is you say, who's my target customer? Okay. And then what you do is you go, okay, let's build a persona up of this target customer. What do they do? What does their day look like? Okay. So what does their day look like? This is happening to you. Okay. And thousands of businesses are competing to do this. They've all got different ideas of who you are using your data. This is where it's gone wrong. But so they go, okay, what does my average day look like? Well, it turns out that they've got that data now. They know that you drive to here and go to there and buy that, click on that. Okay, this is where your individual touch points at the aggregate, they can go, okay, so where are 14-year-old girls going right now? This is data-driven marketing. What's the trend? What are most of them doing? When they talk about aggregate data, this is what they mean. On average, what's your average 14-year-old in the United States doing? So we can sell them shit. Sell them manic panic. Okay. Sell them hair dye, makeup, influencers and shit. Okay. Now, what they would do then is they would go, okay, who does that person follow? So who are the influencers? So like your average, they'll do micro influencers, which are people who are sort of less than 2,000 followers. And they'll do sort of medium-sized influencers and sort of the big ones like Kim Kardashian. The Kardashians are actually the really great case study in that model because they monetize. Like people go, oh, she made like $1 billion from doing nothing. I said, yeah, she made $1 billion from doing nothing. That's a skill. Like that's perfect execution of this model. Okay. That was the perfect execution of the intention of this model, which was to sell you shit. Okay. Now, it's basically like that model for politics. But what they do is they go, okay, so let's build a persona. What does the 14-year-old girls look like? Okay, what are the subgroups within those 14-year-old girls? When we were in high school, it used to be goths, skaters, fucking grunge, nerds, people on the internet like me. Fucking no life fucks, those people, okay? And they would segment. That's called a market segment. But then they go, okay, so what does each of those segments, what do they do with their day? Okay, who do they follow? What do they read? All of that stuff. Now, that used to be something that they guessed sort of based on TV ratings and Nielsen boxes and, it was something, or surveys or market research. But now they've just got that data. You don't even need to do market research anymore, like phone calls, okay? It's there. You mash it with census data. And you can cross-reference all of this data. You just got to just buy a license that's like where Palantir have been fucking putting all this stuff on their private blockchain, and they can sort of figure out where things are moving and where people are being nudged and what they will do. So this person they'll tweet it. So when you tweet your breakfast, what are you having for breakfast? Okay. This person's sort of a paleo person. They like they like this stuff. They drink their coffee. They spend a lot of time on Facebook. They don't list their family. It's also what you don't put on Facebook and do put on Facebook that they kind of see. I put everything online and I do put conflicting. So I'm actually easier to confuse than someone who has a predictable pattern. I make myself deliberately sort of scatterbrained and shit. Right? I fool AI. Remember Jesus Bot? That was funny. I'm a boss fight for this shit because I know how it works. But basically it's like, they're on an Apple, they're on an iPhone, they've got the latest iPhone, they're 14 years old and they've got the latest iPhone. Okay, so, all right, who are their parents on Facebook, blah, blah, blah. They get the profile. They spend a lot of time on Tumblr. They're a Harry Potter fan. They're a Doctor Who fan. They like this. Okay, now, one of the things in and I used to train this, which is when you're building a persona, this is that next level. It's not just demographic information, but psychographic information, okay, and sociographics. That's not just sort of your age, gender, that sort of stuff, but it's actually your motivations, your profile, your pain points, all of that sort of stuff. So what causes you stress? What makes you happy? Like these are burn books. They're basically created a burn book for every person. Now, you can see how the Kardashians will just do that to sell makeup and shit, right? Beauty. Make it so that, plastic surgery and diet products and beauty and all that stuff is fine. But Jamila Jamil uses the same model, okay? She's just using it in a different way. As does, but if Big Pharma cotton onto this, which they have, okay, they would do the same thing, which is, okay, who's hanging out on Tumblr? They hang out in the Harry Potter fandoms. I moved forward. So what you would do after mapping that out, so that's an experience map, okay, or mental model, or, there's various other exercises. This is what I used to do. This is what I did as a designer. I contributed directly IP to this shit. This is what, empathy exercises and modeling that, but it's just gone crazy. But also your tweets, your Facebook posts, your family, your relationships, your cycle tracking if you've authenticated with Facebook, your emails, keywords, your website, whether you sit at home all day. Like my phone shows that I'm just sitting here all day. Don't move, don't leave. I go to the shop. No, don't, and I come home. I go to a meeting from time to time, but it's mostly sitting at home. So they know that I'm sort of a shut-in and all that stuff. They know that, they know that I don't talk to my sister. They know I don't talk to my mum, because they know all this stuff. And so what they can do, and that's why that Jesus bot, when they were trying to, use my daughter and stuff and Jesus and shit, that was actually where I was like, that's interesting, psyop, because those are my points. Grew up in a Catholic family. I struggle with some of the religious shit because I want to be religious, but I'm not. I wish I could be. Because it's an easy, I wish I did because it seems cool to believe in God. So they know about that. But they also know that my daughter's not talking to me and, various other things. And, that can be used. So this is marketing doing marketed job. Like they're just doing what we did, which is human-centered design. We didn't even think about it. We just thought we were moving sneakers and all of that behavioral data was to be, again, it was just I think all through history, I think the psychology of an entrepreneur is to be optimistic and only see the best case scenario, because if you consider the worst case scenario, you won't do it. Like when I was going to create a new app, I was just like, I had a point where I just went, what the fuck am I doing? I'm a 42-year-old woman in Perth. It's not going to happen. So then I just went, fuck it. But, when you're younger, or, you kind of, you have to ignore that inner critic in order to, that's the system. In order to be a successful business tech founder, you have to be dishonest with yourself and ignore certain risks and certain parts. And that's sort of kind of what happened, I think, if I'm being charitable. And then power. Obviously, power corrupts people and you compromise, and then all of a sudden, you're here. Like when I said, you've gone from the internet being private to public, okay, and then everyone being a private citizen to being a celebrity, but no one told us that we were expected to behave like that, so everyone still thinks they're acting like a private citizen. So there's all the people just decided what the rules were without consulting us, and it's just, I think that's kind of, I don't think it's just a conscious decision. It's just a series of things that happen that just tell a story, like a year on Wikipedia. Just if you look year on year, you go, it's a series of events, but they lead to a bigger story. Okay, and that's what happened here. But so what you would do is you would have that. It's something that's somewhat neutral. It's a model that, yes, under capitalism, it's neutral. It's neutral because to this day, I have arguments with other people who are working in this space who can somehow reconcile that they're only doing good work. They're selling people things they want and only doing good things. And that's the thing about it being used for politics, is that everyone who's using it for politics thinks they're doing it for the right reasons. Okay, they're doing it to get their side elected. They're doing it to get this person to fundraise or campaign on their behalf. It's just like a Pandora's box. It's just been let out. It's like a weird, it's a kind of a Frankenstein's monster of lots of really good intentions. Path to hell's paved with good intentions. It's a cliche for a reason. But what you would do is then you would design messaging around those specific tailored markets. Okay, so if you, let's say 14-year-old girls hanging out on Tumblr, a Harry Potter fan, what you would do if you were Big Pharma and you were cynical, okay, you know, all those the companies that sort of play lip service to a brand like a meme or a Harry Potter or whatever, and they try to Pottify their fucking shit to fit in and capitalize on the popularity of that thing, right? That's sort of what happens, which is that you would then create messaging that is designed and targeted specifically to that group that will appeal to that group, and that is a higher chance of converting them, okay, into a purchase, or in this case, getting them to sign up or become activists. Now, this is where the conversation becomes whether it's actually a conspiracy or an accident or what, because over time, over years, okay, there's two different sides here, which is Tumblr and 4chan, and they've created Coke versus Pepsi, and these tribes that are at war with each other. And so internet being internet, you've got two sides that are fucking starting shit with each other, and marketers see an opportunity to sort of appeal to one or the other. There's a woke side, the MAGA side, you know, all these things. It's all just data-driven marketing stuff. And this is why it comes back to me saying, looking at the data versus going in it and seeing what's happened, is that, again, a lot of this data is based on an assumption, which is that people are rational choice, that people consent to what they put online, that people aren't like mentally unwell, they're not vulnerable. Like when you actually understand the psychology around this stuff, which is that there's going to be a portion of the internet, anyone who uses any tool, right? Food, alcohol, fucking, you know, anything. There's going to be sort of a portion of those people who are, you know, socioeconomically, psychologically, you know, various other types of vulnerabilities that will sort of, you know, sex, porn, you know, that the use becomes problematic. And that's what we're seeing with the internet. And now I think that was also a blind spot, which is that, again, the internet's not real life. People understand the deal. They understand that there is a difference between the internet and real life. And at some point, someone changed that conversation, and we realized that there are actually real-world consequences, and that people are emotional beings, and manipulating those emotions and that behavioral nudging actually has, like I said, when you're a trained marketer, when you're an accredited marketer and you've got a marketing degree, there's an ethics unit. When you're a journalist, there's an ethics unit. When you're an actual professional, there's an ethics unit. But when you're in a digital agency who's sort of building their own parachute while they're falling out of the plane and we're figuring it out. I got into a fight. Well, I always get into fights, but another reason why people think I'm a cunt is because I was aggressively pushing for industry, you know, regulation and industry standards for this industry very early on. Like this was, 2004. Because I was like, no, we need to set like ethical standards like any other industry, because this is a Wild West, man, and this is what's going to happen. And I got you know, all sorts of shit, you know, attacked by the people that were doing all this stuff. I was quite comfortable with being held to ethical standards because ethical. But people don't realize that this is an unregulated industry, like tech. Like it was just sort of, okay, well, what? Again, the internet's not real life, therefore the real life doesn't apply. At university, when I was working at a university having to do social media policy, there was a whole fucking so many documents generated for a social media policy, and I came in as a consultant on it, and they were struggling to get it passed because academics being academics, they were haggling over the details, and I came in and gave them a 10-point guideline and said, code of conduct applies online and socially. You represent the university. You know, behave yourself. All of the same rules apply. Code of conduct, you know, imbalance, you know, like relationships with students, all that sort of stuff. It all applies. Easy. Policy done. And that was 2011. And that was something where it shifted and it started to be like, but still the pervasive view was the internet's separate from real life. Therefore, it needs separate governance, separate things, separate strategy. And it doesn't. And this is where that holistic brand strategy became important. But also you can see where these things, it was an unregulated industry with people thinking that it wasn't real life, that it was detached from real life, didn't know the weapon that they had. We didn't have an ethical framework, and I fought for an ethical framework and lost. It's still a fairly unregulated industry, okay? But, you know, most, you know, anyone who's half decent actually does still just voluntarily subscribe to it or quit like me when they realise that it's fucking hopeless. Or they spin it so that they say they're ethical and they're not. And that's what my course is going to be, which is selling ethics with no real requirement for them to do it because I know they're not going to. But they can say they could, so I make money and they can tick a box. Bad. But that's what this diversity and inclusion stuff is. It's the same thing. It's the woke stuff. But then when you start to create these segments, you kind of because you're also trying to build fans, you're trying to build markets. But then they start to see an opportunity in keeping the brand conversation going. That was the big buzzword at the time. Branded content. Conversations. It's ridiculous because one of the things that I said early on was that social media is social. No one wants to talk to a logo. Okay? So the brand, early days of internet advertising were funny because the brands came in like, hello, children, let's have a discourse about our shoes. It's like, no one wants to talk about your shoes. We're hanging out. You need to come and integrate with us. You need to fit in with us. This was, again, prevailing wisdom. You need to fit in with us and what we're talking about, not what you're talking about. Okay, that was where customer service changed. It became less about sort of, methodical customers. That's why you're seeing now social media managers just being pure customer service. Okay, like most of the ones who get it, they're just pure customer service now. They go, yep, what's the problem? Okay, here you go, manage, escalate. Okay, cool. And then they'll do the separate advertising campaign. And they won't, but there's still those amateur, junior, 20-something marketers that think that you can go in and go, hello, fellow children, what are we talking about today? Trans women are women, am I right? Because they think that that's they've done. If anything, it's actually a measure of the fact that they the data is inaccurate, because what they do is they go and they look at the data, what people are talking about, but they don't look at what people aren't talking about or afraid to talk about. So they go in and that's actually, if anything, it's a sign that it's actually just data-driven marketing by a junior marketer who doesn't fucking understand this is what I'm going to run the course on. It's so that they don't do this because they think everyone is on that train and on the wagon and all that shit, but they don't realize the political climate and all of the stuff that's happening underneath, and they go in and say this thing and it just backfires. It's actually pretty funny. And then but the problem that happens then is that because of this, you've got messaging. So in international relations politics, you've got the messaging, but then you've got the counter messaging. Okay, so in order to fight propaganda, you have counter propaganda. So in the case of a tweet that says trans women are women, okay, what you'll see happen, and this is what I keep saying about the optics with the TERF thing and the TERF army, right, is that what they receive is a fucking backlash of people going, what? And they get whiplash. Now, this is where the mainstream media and the manufacturing consent and the US stuff and that securitization stuff and writing legitimate political dissidents off as conspiracy theorists, that's where there's that political aspect, okay? So what happens is with that history versus that's with that narrative of Tumblr. This is a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about in the book. I hope you might find it interesting. But Tumblr versus 4chan, it created that sort of that good guys, anti, that kind of, the sort of tribal war. That was the sort of, Gamergate was where that sort of collided. But that's why Gamergate is mentioned a lot. That's why it's why it's so significant. And that's my frustration with, Graham is talking about game. It's like, okay, I actually understand. People keep mentioning Gamergate because it is in their muscle memory as a turning point, but they don't know. They're not saying what I said, which is that was where that's where the narrative shifted between victims and perpetrators, between two warring market segments that had been cured and nudged and curated by marketers, but also used politically. And basically, like I said, people are scrambled eggs for brains. They're fucking, a few weeks back, I said, honestly, the thing that interests me the most in 2021, my experimental side, a curious side kicks in. I go, how much can our brains actually withstand? This is a weird experiment. Will we adapt or will we fucking self-destruct? I hope we'll adapt. That's my role, is to help you understand that things that, if you're having a visceral reaction and a confusion it's like there's a reason, and that's because you're being pulled and nudged and like in all directions. And that's, from a sensory point of view, that's tremendously confusing, but also tremendously unprecedented in these unprecedented and strange times where everyone's online. That's why I find it fascinating, because we've got a control group of people. This is what I find really interesting, is that we've got a control group of people that weren't very internet savvy, weren't online, didn't really care about it, forced online with a group B who are digital, like myself, who are resilient and can handle it and navigate it and survive. And I'm like, which will live? It's like, again, if you like, it's really fascinating. We're going to talk through that. But on the ground, like, you've got these segments, and it's just opportunism and marketing, and it's just a structure and a model that, again, incentivizes certain things that are intended to be good. Shopping trolley analogy again, the shopping cart return. Most people put it back the right way. One dumb fuck puts it in backwards or in the wrong spot, and society breaks down. It's anarchy in the car park, right? It's just fucking full-blown chaos from one fuckwit who didn't realize that there was a convention, right? Who didn't look at the things that were there. It's usually the first few in there because they don't have any social proof. But, when the thing's full and it's all lined up, people go, oh, there's a bit, okay. Oh, is this how this thing works, even though I shop every week? Oh, okay then. Anyway, it's interesting. But I'm just saying, so it's not, again, what I want to say is that there's no conspiracy theory, but there is a power structure, which is that imperialist structure, that constant history. When you look at all the events as lists, when you look at year on year on year on year, event after event after event, and you look at the theory and you look at the history, there's a bigger story there, which is, it's capitalism, globalism, propaganda, espionage, manufacturing consent, fucking China, Russia laughing their asses off that they only had to. I was thinking about this. I reckon Russia allocated $1 billion to destabilize the United States. They spent $50 on a troll farm and went, whoa, didn't realize it'd be that quick. Cool. Little push, little poke. But that's happening as well, which is, the political propaganda, but also the US electoral system, which is just marketing. It's MLM. It's just a fucking, if you think America is free and democratic, then you fucking got rocks in your head. It's theater. It's a show. It's just totalitarian fucking fascism run by corporations that tells you that you're free, but you're not free. Okay. It's just, anyway. But that's the narrative. When you look at the events, you got the events, and then you look at what's considered the important events in history, and you look at what's left out in history. But then you, year on year, look at the bigger picture and what's the common stuff in history. And the common stuff in history is that this is, that people are going to take advantage of every, even well-intentioned system. Okay. I don't think, honestly, look, I know that this is a controversial view, but I don't believe that Zuckerberg is an evil person. I think you just become that way through this system that everyone hates. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and she's somebody who's really, she knows a lot of this, like, sort of diplomatic. She's like an international person. She knows all the people. I know people. Talk to people. You don't know who I don't know. I don't tell you who I don't know because it's the fucking internet. It's not secret anymore. But she said that the common thing, she's also like a fan of Marxist analysis and that sort of stuff as well. So it's really cool to find common ground, to have a discussion with someone who doesn't think I'm insane. Because Paul thinks I'm boring because this is all like, he doesn't find any of this interesting at all. And the internet thinks I'm a fuckwit and I just get fucking actually all day. So it's fun to actually to talk to someone who actually works in geopolitics and NGOs and all that sort of stuff. Go, you know what? And say, yep, you're not crazy. You're correct. 100%. That's exactly what's happening. And she's like, I'm talking about it. I'm reading the book. I'm reading like all of the stuff, Woke Inc. and all those books and all that stuff. Can't say I am. I think this gender thing is bullshit. And this is someone, these are people who are actually powerful. Actually have influence. And that's the thing about mouthing off online versus actually negotiating behind the scenes. Okay. I don't think that this will last long. because I think, and what she actually said was something quite interesting, which was she said, it's not so much about sort of, she said everyone aside from the psychopaths, okay, even sort of millionaires, even sort of celebrities, all those people that are sort of rich, they're 1%, they're not 0.1%, but everyone hates the system because you're either left out by it and abused by it, or you've sold out so much that you're compromised by it. And that's why these celebrities are just hiding on this, because there's the guilt there. It's that shadow self and guilt, and realize how much you've given up. Because when you see people like me who are willing to give stuff up and who are willing to burn it to the ground for truth and integrity, and will happily just burn and starve rather than sort of capitulate to this thing, that is, that makes you reflect on your own stuff and your own role in things. And people feel uncomfortable, so they deflect it, and then they just go along. And it's like, I understand. Again, don't be mean to people who agree with you but don't talk publicly about it, because people are complicated. They have lots of different reasons, and people have baggage and guilt. And again, they might be an academic and be trapped by this narrative that, working at the university is the only thing good about them, or their friendship group and their networks are the only thing that makes them worthy, or, their fans they're aware that fandoms and that parasocial relationships, they have a flip side, which is that, people get too intense and people are vulnerable. Okay, especially right now in this is why I'm like, with J.K. Rowling, I have a more complicated view on that, because I go, well, it's timing and, if she'd said it 3 years ago, it would be different, or, 5 years ago, it would be different. But it was just in the middle of a time when all the kids were at home and their parents, and they're alienated from their parents. They hate their parents, and Jay, they look to her like a mother figure. And like, I don't know, I just thought, again, I'm just saying it's that private citizen thing versus public. And like, I think that she needs to acknowledge the hurt and the betrayal of someone who understands her fans and understands fans. Well, I think that's what's bugging me is when public figures don't take that seriously. But I've talked about that. I'll talk about that more in detail. But this is why, but also the fact that if you know about these market segments and you know that it's being used this way. So if I'm talking about, this is what I'm trying to get through to people, is when you're talking about this issue, okay, if you don't know it really, really well, if you don't know your theory well, if you don't know the issue well, if you can't navigate it, I got on a list. I was misunderstood. I'm saying, like, I am now, I don't know if my name is Mud or not, whether it's just a thing, but, everyone's fucking probably muted me or blocked me at this point because I'm not taking sides. I noticed the fucking tumbleweeds. And it's like, this is what it is. This is what happens. And most people can't. I thrive on being like lonely. It's my whole fucking story, because I don't fit in. I'm okay with that. But there are people who aren't okay with that, and it kills them inside. And this is like inside fMRI, right? Social isolation and exclusion shows in the same, so it lights up the same pain centers in your brain as being punched physically or hurt physically. It's the same pain in the brain. The brain, okay, it's not, obviously you have other senses, but I'm saying in the brain, it is received as pain, the same pain, okay, as being punched in the face, okay, being bullied and that stuff. So it's not just sticks and stones and shit. It is actually backed in science. And so, you've got to understand that what's at stake. When people don't speak out, I think they're actually fucking smart not to. And maybe, but I also want to provide some reassurance for those, because I have gone through, like on the bus, I just go and sit right at the back with all the people that no one likes and makes the middle class uncomfortable. Okay. Remember when I talked about that? But, when you go through it, you have a different view. You experience it. You see it. Okay. You see it for what it is, and you can have a better understanding of what it is. Not just the data, but you pay attention to what's not said and what people aren't saying and what's happening, the conversations behind the scenes. Because people assume that because I don't have fucking like 1 million YouTube followers that I don't can't call up fucking CEOs and have a meeting, that I can't talk to people. Like, it's like, what the fuck? They think fame is influence, which is stupid. But the conversations that I have in the background, okay, I'm going to reassure you that people are aware of it. And if they continue with it, it's because either there's something bigger going on, like, fucking stop listening to fucking people like Tim Pool. Stop listening to people who are escalating. Okay. I'm actually trying to just get people thinking and pausing and not being so lizard brained. But you've got to understand that if you talk about any issue, whatever it is, remember the early days of Twitter when you couldn't say the word iPad or iPhone because you'd get an automatic spam message. Remember that? Now, if you put a keyword in that tweet and you're friends with people and they've got your behavioural data, you get an AI, you get chat, you get bots, okay? You get on lists and then they start marketing to you. And that's right, I was explaining what omnichannel is. So once they get you to a certain point, it's called, and then once they do that profile on you, I'll come back to this. Again, these streams, there's overlapping topics, I'm just trying to sort of get a better picture and a broader picture of where I'm at. And you can stay with me, not stay with me, that's fine. It's fine. I'm just not going to be a cam girl for this fucking this shit now. I'm just so disappointed in so many people. It's just crazy. Okay. Bridget Fedesi knows this. I've told her. So whatever she's saying, whatever. Anyway, it's what people leave out that's most interesting. James Lindsay leaves out the geopolitics and the history and the fact that the CIA deliberately had a strategy to fund all of these deconstruction, postmodern ideas in universities to fucking implode Marxist critique of the United States. I think that's kind of relevant. But they left it out. Again, what do they leave out? What do people leave out? What do the Democrats leave out? Well, they leave out that their marketing strategy, that this funnel, this MLM, that their $27 fundraising is basically just fucking televangelism. And they put everyone into the one big CRM and then they target them, where they call it nudging the needle. That's the organizer's handbook that I've talked about. But what do the Republicans leave out? They accuse the Republicans of doing it. The Republicans accuse the Democrats of doing it. Same models, the same thing. It's the things that everyone signs up for but is left out of history. Like capitalism, everyone signs up for the elephant in the room, but they never address it. Never. That's the shit that I'm interested in. The dynamics, the story throughout. Not about events, not about fucking individual things, but just the broader shit where that's why my book is like, I am nobody, but this is what has happened. This is my story because I know my story would be left out of this, which is the fact that tech companies changed the deal on us. All these things, right? So that's sort of the theme. That's what I'm aiming for. And that, the internet was by and large colonized by the United States through their tech companies and the way that VCs and stuff took over and decided what succeeded and what didn't on the internet. And if it was a competitor that was, whatever, they would just put more money to the competitor and leave people like me out. I realized it wasn't my products that made me fail to get funded and seed funding because my products were good. I'm good. It was the fact that I was fucking had ethics and didn't serve a purpose. I wasn't, and that's why Mark Zuckerberg and Jack. It's why they look the way they look. It's why they're shells of human beings, because they did a deal with the devil, and that it's not. And they just say that, and this is that sort of myth of capitalism and tech. If you work 22 hours a day and you want it enough and you work hard enough and you refine your pitch, that's busy work. At the end of the day, they've already decided who they want to give money to, and that's people who support power structure and the incentive and support that machine. And so once you see that, you go, okay, well, it's not me. I'm not going to, okay, I wish I'd known earlier. I would have slept a bit more and wrangled with code a little less. I would have written more blog posts and not stop writing for 10 years out of fear of fucking saying the wrong thing in case a VC saw it. But, you live and learn. But I can talk about it now in retrospect. But I'm saying that Jack Zuckerberg, look at these founders. They start young and then they get rich. But then over time, they turn into Bill Gates. They turn into fucking broken people. They look. And again, when you're paying attention to nonverbal cues and dynamics and the gaps, you see that the system, they're going to be that. That's inevitable. Psychopaths become CEOs because the system is set up to behave psychopathically and not have empathy. And yes, some CEOs cut through somehow by accident. Usually it's because they pretended and behaved a certain way for a long period of time and then they switch. Or they were already rich and wealthy and powerful and had the networks, right? But every so often they'll put up some working class kid as an example of because you can't have all elites succeeding all the time because people might figure out that it's a bit fucked. Because if I'd seen that it was as fucked as it was and that there was no chance, I wouldn't have behaved as much, right? But what you do is you create these this is why this woke shit's great because everyone can claim to be oppressed and victims. And what it does is it ultimately leaves the elephant fucking sitting in the room, which is it's all rich people with networks and power and blue checks and endorsed people. And if you work hard enough or behave hard enough or, let's just say if I basically behaved just as on par with Owen Jones, nothing I've done is worse than what he says, but he's got the endorsement of power because he sells this narrative that if you're a young gay man and, you can be clever and witty and sassy and, say all the right things about socialism, people might actually ignore the fact that a poor person who didn't go to a posh school, if you mimic him, you're outside. It's actually very interesting when you meet people who are like you but upper class. Like I meet a lot of people who are like me, except they had money and networks, and they are. It becomes very clear that it's not. But the system somehow sort of wires it in a way that makes it feel like it's you that you haven't tried hard enough. It's gaslight. It's bullshit. And I think that a lot of people this year with the dick rocket, the fucking dick rocket, stick in the sky. Before our eyes, there was a dick in the sky during a pandemic. And we start to see that there's something wrong here. And everyone sees that thing and they go, okay, I think maybe it's time to fucking question a few things. Seems a little crass. Seems a little like bad optics, but you'll still have middle-class people who think it's impolite to point out that there's a dick in the sky because they don't want to lose their job, or they think that if they pretend that a dick in the sky isn't ridiculous and offensive and grotesque, that they might just maybe, if they don't. This was Bourdieu's core criticism and Marx with the sort of, building on sort of Marxist principles, socialist principles around the middle class. And that the middle class will always shit on the working class because they think that if they shit on the working class enough, okay, and the welfare class and that sort of stuff, they shit and pretend. This is that vulgar working class thing. And this is why I swear and why I do what I do. It's strategic. I'm quite capable of leaning in and being a fancy speaky lady, okay? I don't. But that's because I am conscious of the fact that I spent at least a decade trying to fit in with these people who ultimately fucking despise me. Okay, they don't respect me. They don't think I'm good enough. They will never think I'm good enough. And you never get out of being working class. That's the mark. That's really the critique of superstructure is this ideology. You've got superstructure, which creates this sort of, false consciousness, right? That you have power, a false consciousness that you have upward mobility, false consciousness that arguing about ideology and that ideas matter and merit matters and that, this is all superstructure stuff. This is what Marx talked about. It's all superstructure. And there's all sort of a way for the middle class to feel a misguided sense of loyalty to the people who don't give a fuck about them. And we're seeing this play out. And Mark said, yeah, you can keep doing that for a while. I don't know, till something like a pandemic or some crisis happens, or people get fed up and you take the piss and you overstay your welcome, ruling class. This is what we're seeing, is people's fucking class consciousness come out. Unfortunately, this is where Chomsky comes in, or Herman and Chomsky, manufacturing consent, which is the fact that that was a thing, but propaganda is very significant. And this people are confused ideologically because they think it's ideology rather than class. So they will fight over dumb shit and bicker over dumb shit and get into a funnel, okay, for war, to manufacture consent for, securitizing and arresting people, putting people on lists. Putting people on lists. I actually realized because I realized that there's tumbleweeds around my Twitter account since I told MAGAs to fuck off. So I was attracting bots and, all that sort of stuff. I lost patrons, usual shit. Because everyone's mad at me because I won't fucking, push their fucking shit. It's like, no, I think for myself. I don't care. If you thought that, like, my whole career, I've told CEOs at insurance companies that they're full of shit while they were paying me. Do you think I'm going to fucking worry about $5 a month? No, I don't know. That's not how I'm wired. I would like to make money, but I've also realized you can't have your cake and eat it too. So I've accepted that, this is the life. That's the life. Unless I find my Engels, it's kind of one of those things. But I was going to say, oh yeah, no, but propaganda online. You're just being put into a funnel that manufactures consent for war, manufactures consent for big pharma. And this is why the trans debate, I'm worried, because it's not saying that you are like the Christian right. That's the problem, is that there's a narrative coming from the powerful that people who object to this thing are Christian, are conservative, are Christian right. I'm saying you need to be mindful of the fact that you're going to be mischaracterized as conservative. You're going to be mischaracterized because this machine is powerful. And so what happened, that was why, that started with Tumblr and 4chan, which is that there's good guys and bad guys. And the good guys right now are the people who are talking about this woke shit. It's product. So they're it's on the one side or the other, and it's a brand, and it's like, it's popular. But as soon as it becomes, apparent, I have a feeling that because a lot of the smart left people are starting to see this, and a lot of powerful people are going, hey, this is uncool. This woke shit's uncool. It's fascistic. This is enough. It's not ethical. It's clearly a weapon. What's really interesting is when you talk to security people, they go, wow, you figured that out. And they're like, oh, it is a product. I was like, oh, really? I'm not crazy. Okay, cool. Yeah, fucking obvious. I was like, okay, well, thanks for letting me know. Thanks for letting me know before I just imploded my whole fucking life. But I'm saying, but when you talk about this stuff, you need to understand the forces that exist. And this is the course that I want to do for marketers and comms people, is say you can't ignore this. You can't pretend that this isn't a problem. This is a real risk for business. It's a real risk for anyone who's sort of, again, I don't want to target it at business, but I fucking have to, because they pay my bills. Okay. All right. Brazenly, but the problem is, okay, also, this is when I say about the policy outcome, is that I don't want to be attached to one of those events that you see on Wikipedia that are listed, that everyone decided to take notice of and amplify at the expense of the context and the story and the individual stories, and Taya not being born in April 1979, not being on Wikipedia, and Taya's opinions not being fucking blue checked, and Taya's thoughts on the matter not being deliberately ignored by the powerful at the expense of something else that is included in history. If I am attached to something in history, I don't want it to be that it was the thing that was a catalyst for universities to be completely privatized for business and the humanities. I don't want it to be that. I don't want it to be attached to, why Judith Butler is attaching herself to this shit. It's like, she's not going to be, it's not in history. It's not good. It's not good for her. Okay. You have to have a historical view of when people read dot points of what happened in 1979, things become very clear. Very clear very quickly when you read year on year and the list of highlights in the highlight reel. That's what I'm saying, is that I'm aware of the highlight reel. People will take me on, like, you know, the overall intentions and the overall behaviours and the overall actions. If I end up attached to some right-wing anti-trans bill, I don't want to be. I'm sorry. We can fight for women's rights. Yes. I would like to be attached to the suffragette movement. Yes. But again, it's like, well, radical feminists were also attached to the prohibition laws. How's history? Again, when they say wrong side of history, it's a stupid thing to say, but it is worth thinking about. If you're being charitable, you should think about where these things come from. It is worth thinking about that, because most of us, see, that's what I find funny about these woke fucks, and why they show that they're elite is that they think that working class people get included in history. They're so elite and so used to fucking having everything their own way, they've assumed that history is going to think about them at all. Most of them are going to be 2,000 people died, if you're lucky. Look at COVID last year. Do we know then? Okay, New York Times put their names, but, you know, for the most part, okay, most of us go that way, quietly in hospital with a blip, okay? Thankfully, I know this, and that's why I write every fucking thought I ever have for the database in the sky, so that maybe when that dick rocket hits Mars, maybe I might have a little bit of an impact. Or if I'm published and I maybe get the book out, that's something that I've done and accomplished. But that's what people need to think about. But it's also, you know, but that's why, you know, I think it's maybe because I've had like the risk of very young death as well. I just see my mortality. I see legacy. I see, you know, I see that stuff more than others. But it's like, we've got to think, it's like, is it really worth it? Is it worth it? Okay. You know, but also being mindful of the forces at play, the fact that we're on the brink of, if we're not already in it. Again, how history looks at things is that we're probably 3 years into World War III. We just don't realise. No one said we're in World War II now. This is number 2. When is it? Just fucking started, and it led up to it. And the Weimar Republic didn't go, oh, fuck, okay, this is going to be, you know, they didn't do that. But unfortunately, well, fortunately for us, we have data and history that we refuse to learn from, for a start, but also that, you know, the information can be available. This is the thing that I find interesting, is that I've been warning about these things, is that the data and the information and everything is there and people still won't listen. And we hurtle towards it. And I go, wow, that's weird. It's crazy. Because again, people got to survive. They've got to eat. And, you know, I think when you actually know this, you feel like you've got to act. And if you don't act, you feel guilty. And I suppose that would have an effect on your mental health. It's hard to deal with this stuff. Anyway, I've talked for way too long today, but I'm going to go. But yeah, it's just whatever. I might come back on tomorrow. I don't think anyone's going to watch a 3-hour replay. But it's here. Share it if you want, and say, just, if you do share my stuff, just say, hey, you know, it's worth, I get there, you know, like, don't let the first sort of 10 minutes full. I mean, people share Tim Dillon and stuff a lot, and I'm not saying he's not hilarious, but he builds up. He takes, you know, he's still sort of, you know, and they edit and all that sort of stuff, and I don't. This is all unedited. So I think I'm doing, you know, and I'm also just in the business of, I'm trying to put out here what others are maybe thinking, and maybe just giving you permission to just think it through and live out loud and think, you know, just be afraid. Don't. I honestly think that you're going to persuade more people to speak up by saying, hey, I understand why you don't, and giving them tools where they can make a difference in small ways, rather than sort of, you know, bludgeoning people with you know, you can't sit there sharing the death threats and sharing the cancellations and sharing the fucking TRA shit and sharing all that stuff and not think that that also has a chilling effect on it's like, well, you know what? Yeah, I did receive that stuff, but also I'm going to reassure you that, you know, it's hard. But you've got to be honest with yourself about You got to make sure you can pay your bills and pay your rent. And, you know, if your social group is really important to you, then shut the fuck, you know, like if you think that, like, if that's, take care of your mental health. Okay. I'm watching the decline of people's mental health, people that were fine to begin with, but are kind of on a decline. And you can see it again if you pay attention to the gaps. And if you're someone who, you know, I don't read the literal stuff. I don't never take people on face value, really. I sit and I pay attention to the conversations. I pay attention to what's not said. I pay attention to, like, body language. And again, it's not about mind reading. It's just, it's a muscle that I've got. I've always done that because I struggled to understand nonverbal shit as a kid. I didn't understand girls. Still fucking don't. But, you know, I had to learn. And I think when you learn social cues the hard way, I think you're kind of more tuned to that stuff. And I've always just been in, people are my fucking, you know, what's that show, Atypical, with these penguins. I'm like, people are my penguins. I just watch every interaction and how they interact. And also the thing about that shadow self and, like, assuming that people behave differently online than they do in real life. And some people are newer than you. Like, I've already gone through this. I've lived through it. I know it. It's like when you've been divorced and then you see a newly divorced person going through all the same. So some things you have to just go through. You can't avoid. It's like when your parent dies or you know, whatever. You can't, you know, you think there's some things you just have to go through, and it's a process. It's like grief and divorce and being cancelled, you know, all those things, all of these things, the things you have to go through. And this massive disruption to our lives and sense of identity is something we have to go through. And I just happen to have gone through it young. And so I'm hoping that I can just sort of, you know, give insight along the way. But, you know, I have deleted some of the videos where I've gone extra hard on the turf shit, but that's, again, it's not like, I think if you're paying attention, it's not about the issue or being correct. It's about how it might be received. And if you're trying to actually, like for me, I'm trying to, you know, get published and a book and maybe reach other audiences with speaking and you know, what's going to be most effective? Me doubling down on that can I lose that video for the ability to get a meeting or, you know, talk to people, or, you know, again, this is the thing. You got to be careful. You got to be very clear on what you're willing to compromise and not. I'm willing to compromise on swearing thing. I can make the case for it, which is that it's strategic, it's vulgar working class stuff, all of that thing. I want to appeal to people who aren't academic. It's on purpose. I can do academic. I just don't like it, and I don't think it's effective because you end up in an echo chamber of with Eric Weinstein talking out his ass for 9 hours a day and never doing anything to solve the problem other than just talking to other people who like blowing shit out their ass. Okay, that's not really what I'm about. I like to persuade everyday people. I like to see that shift in people where they go, oh, I never thought of that way. And that's why I say the same thing over and over again, different ways. It's because I like to see where I can get that epiphany and that little moment where people go, oh, politics is cool. My power isn't like being a fuckwit on the streets and anti-mask and altercations with police. My power is in knowing how my preferences flow and how the system works and how lobbying works and consultation and being able to write my perspective and contribute to the conversation. And, you know, like that's the power that people have, and they don't even realize that they have it. Well, temporarily. But also they don't realize that everything that you do is recorded, and there's multiple factors there, which is that you're going to end up on a list. You're going to end up on a funnel. And also, if it's misused, like it has been, like with Twitter, I feel like maybe I think they got rid of my dev account. I've only got 2 API keys, which is weird. And because I'm political, but I think they've also put some sort of, because when there's a new social network, I go and register the username. I just reserve the username, like Gab, Parler, but I don't use them. I just register them. Try them out, do a couple of posts, and then just keep them there in case they're the next big account. It's like when you're on the internet, you know that you've got to get your username. Otherwise, I find myself like, you know, like with Instagram when I didn't, like, yeah. Anyway, that was different. I got banned from Instagram. That was different. But then you end up, but the thing about that is that your intention is to reserve the username, but if the CIA, if the security, if the intelligence or whoever the fuck, FBI, sorry, or ASIO or whoever the fuck, federal police, want to put me on, associate me with somebody who, on Parler with all these people that were on the Capitol riots, when all I did was go and use the username and reserve it, that they then cross-reference that, because this is where this like cross-platform banning becomes like very dangerous, because by association, whether I like it or not, like I'm associated in a database as Twitter username, Parler username, Gab username, connected to this person who was at the fucking riots, or who incited this, or who did that. I think maybe we'll knock on her door. At least I'm on a list of people who are at least, you head above the pulpit, right? Was it a pulpit, I think. You've got to start thinking more about what you're sticking your neck out for and whether it's worth it. Right? And think it through. Like I said, don't put anything online that you don't want, that you're not okay with defending, like on the news. Trust me, that's happened to me too. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to go. We can keep talking about this, but I'm going to go. I'm tired. I need another coffee. But I might stream tomorrow. Oh no, I'm getting vaccinated. Oh fuck, I wasn't going to talk about that. I made a decision to not fucking talk about it. But yes, I've got an appointment tomorrow, and then I've got to do some stuff. So I won't be streaming tomorrow. And it's school holidays, so it may be like erratic, but I'm trying maybe to think about doing a weekend stream because people tend to be more around. I turn into a pumpkin after fucking 7 o'clock. That's the only problem. But I'll be back soon. I'll schedule some stuff. Anyway, I'm around. But I'm writing the book, and hopefully if you can soldier on through this fucking 3 hours, if you can soldier on through 3 hours of Eric Weinstein talking shit, you can listen to me. I'm sure. Unless you're a dude and don't like women talking, then obviously that's a problem. But I really, like, I'm really trying to now produce content, output, right? Because you'll see that there's a lot of stuff to talk about. There's a lot. If you look at my you look at my like mind map of this thing, I've got a map of every touch point, the funnel. It's cross-discipline. It's so many different things. But I try to get the information out through streams, but no one watches 3-hour streams. So I've got to start biting this into small chunks. But again, if you're going to write something, you've got to be able to back it. So then you've got to go look at the research and fucking argument and editing. And, so this stuff is not – most people are paid to do these things. And most people are paid to share propaganda. Most people are paid or they say stupid shit for fucking cam girl money. Okay. I'm not earning, I've demonetized my channel because I'm not, because of this stuff, because it's just too much admin. But also like it's a lot of work. I'm not a journalist. I'm not employed by a university. I'm not employed by a newspaper. I'm not employed by anybody. I do this for myself, and I have a couple of freelance clients. But, again, the more freelance work I take on, the more it takes me away from the work that I want to do. So, and again, I know I'm also conscious of the fact that people are fucking like in a pandemic, and I would rather millionaires pay me because I want some rich conservatives to see that they need the balance. They need that yin-yang socialist balance for things to not go badly. That's the problem, is that I think that seems to be the glaringly, like they're fighting this woke thing, but they're fighting and taking down the whole left with them without an understanding of the consequences that in a political situation and in parliament and in policy, you need both sides in there getting at it. That's, you need that pluralistic balance and that negotiation. And like, because capitalism off the fucking rails needs the socialists to go, hey, this hurts people. Because we're seeing this in tech. This is what happens when an unregulated new industry that's purely driven by millionaires and billionaires out of the United States and purely like psychopathic in the way that it operates, everyone, you need that person in the room. Because if I was in the room with these engineers and they don't think about it, it's a blind spot about what they're doing. They're doing cool shit. They think it's just cool shit and they're going to get rich. They're going to get They're going to be the next unicorn. You need people, annoying people like me in the room going, guys, calm it, stop. Because it could be so much worse if I didn't speak up and people like me didn't critique it. And that's what the right, especially the US right, don't understand is how, because this is American exceptionalism, is they think that history can't teach us things, especially history from Europe, which is that generally what happens when one side is fucking not able. You don't have someone challenging you. I like it when conservatives challenge me, especially around things like God or, the wrong or philanthropy, billionaire stuff, philanthropy, that kind of stuff. Everything's complicated, but I think those conversations need to occur because there's a balance and a correction, and it stops you in your tracks and it makes you go, even if you're wrong, it makes you go, I think about it for a second. Oh, no, okay, no, here's why. It holds you to account for your thoughts. And this is what's happening at the moment, is that we're being held to account for thoughts in the complete wrong areas, while this beast is allowed to run roughshod and basically implode and destroy. Depending on which side of politics you're on, you'll have the angel, devil, depending on which one you think is which. But you need the angel on the shoulder and the devil on the shoulder, and you need that conversation. Otherwise, things get really fucking ugly really fucking fast. And that's the problem with this, the culture war stuff, and why I won't feed it is because it's a distraction from the very serious conversation about conservatives and capitalism and socialism, and how we those sorry, my stutter, getting tired. That cleavage that has never, how we can build that bridge and find a way to understand the symbiosis and how delicate this, finding consensus is. And that doesn't mean being nice. That doesn't mean respectability politics necessarily. I'm saying everything has a place. But what I'm saying is that, that we need each other. Paul and I, we're different in some ways, but we cross over in others. And separate, we're not, we're kind of broken and all those, various other things. But together we're the strength of 10. And there's a multiplier attached to collaboration with yin and yang. There's a multiplier there. There's a reason why that philosophy fucking is so resonant. It's because it's true. If you work with, people that are different to you, rather than people that are the same, or falling for this narcissism of small differences horseshit with right-wingers who are pretending to they're controlled opposition to capitalism and use capitalism's weapons against the people who are actually the most the most important voices to be heard, which is, workers and the welfare class and the most vulnerable, because the mark of a good policy is really how it affects the most vulnerable at the end of the day, because that's the role of government, is to protect all citizens. Okay. And that's the metric that you should be going by, not GDP, not wealth, but happiness and the well-being of your people. So it's more important that you listen to fucking people who are really fucking apologize and repeal all Centrelink debt for now. Say we fucked up on Robo. That's how you get 95% vax rate tomorrow. We fucked up. We were wrong. We're sorry. We're going to do better. Okay. As a gesture, you don't have to pay your Centrelink debts. Anybody, whether it's we're abandoning it. We'll figure it out. We're going to fix it. We'll raise the money somewhere else. But no, as a gesture, that's how you get your vax rate. But no, that's the elephant in the room, is that you just, But anyway, I'm going to, hang on, there's another chat. So that's very fair. The culture wars are a symptom. Yeah, they're not really the thing, and it's just a big distraction. And also, the more you argue about shit in the culture wars, the more it's like a beast that feeds. It's a self-feeding beast. It's like the blob. It's like this. And so the more that you talk about and give fuel to and attention to these issues, the more you first of all, convince other people to feed the beast. You create all of the, and also you're on a funnel, and also you're picking a side, and you're also being nudged in whatever direction based on all of your behavior and, if you think that you're in control of this, you're not. You're being nudged. I've watched it. Like I said, there is a very clear track, and I understand that track because that thing, that trust, once your trust in an institution is betrayed, once you question everything, like with the ABC News and stuff. Like I just assume it's all bullshit now, which is not true. It's not always the case. But when you've got an important thing where you need people to trust you, like with vaccinations, it's really fucking hard to, when someone's cheated on you once. Well, I'm telling the truth this time. It's like, well, yeah, okay. That's human nature to not trust something that's deceived you before. But I wish people would just say it. But yeah, so it is a symptom, but the more you feed it, the more that you perpetuate it and the worse it gets and the less room there is, because what happens is people get more radicalized, so they get more angry at people like me, so I end up fucking deplatformed and I'm the one who's actually got the... You see what it feeds, but also I'm the one who ends up on the fucking lists because people are actually radicalized. It's not about the issue. It's actually more about the like I said, the funnel or the conveyor belt. It's not really a conveyor belt because that's a direct, but it's a non-linear thing, like the touch point. Oh, actually, I forgot to go back. I'll talk about that again. But, it's not just, it's not a linear thing. It's not a conveyor belt like from left, this issue to the right. It's the fact that you're getting lots of inputs. And it's also who you're relating with, your behavioral, you're being targeted with certain content and like the algorithm. You're having certain interactions with government and authorities, which are negative. Okay. So you're being, you had to go to an emergency room and you had to wait 5 hours and you start to, it's that big awakening, but that big awakening is what Q is selling or what the red pillars are selling. That's why it's and woke. To become woke, it's the same thing. You start it's using your natural biases. Availability heuristic. It's what availability bias, which is that once when you see one model of car and you notice the color of it, and then suddenly you see 5 red cars. That's what this plays on. And what it does is it's like omni-channel marketing. It takes about 69 to 70 exposures to a piece of marketing to get you to buy on average. Okay. So lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of sort of, but it's that psychology of marketing with that availability where like when, I'm sure that people who are gender critical will see this, right? Where you go, I didn't even know this was a thing. And then you read it and you're fucking hell. But then you start to see it everywhere. But that's fed by algorithms as well because that's relevant content. But it's also, you start to go, oh shit, you're reading articles on it from trusted then your interactions with government, then you're getting cherry-picked propaganda from, but then you get the love bomb from the people that are trying to nudge you towards this alt-right shit, okay? And that's why, and that's why Joe Rogan is a complicated beast because he sort of radicalizes and de-radicalizes and it's very confusing, but he sort of sits in the fucking, Joe Rogan sits in the cleavage, everybody. But, again, it's just sort of an accident. He's a really interesting fellow. But that's where the disingenuousness of the IDW types not being aware of this. There's people who are super fucking smart. They're not that smart because they can't see what I see. They have a PhD. I don't. Maybe I'm smart anyway. But if anything, the IDW is watching the decline of Brett and into Conspiracy Town is a really good fucking test of proof that a PhD, especially a PhD from America, doesn't make you intelligent necessarily. It just teaches you how to pretend to be. But anyway, so it's a factory for it's so bizarre. Anyway, but again, that's that whole thing where Perth sort of sits in a crevice, cleavage. With our 1% are like uneducated school of life bogans, and everyone's mad about it. I was mad about it for a long time, but you get over it. That's not how it's supposed to be, and they don't give a fuck about. They are who they are. Bogans don't give a fuck. I grew up with my dad who just talked to anyone. He didn't give a fuck if you're a hobo or a millionaire. It's like me, found you interesting. He just wanted to know your story. And that's how it should be. But there's a whole bunch of people that are so fucking stuck up their own asses at their status and clout chasers and the influencers. You just, all those people. It's like, and they think that influence is about like how many retweets you get. It's like, yeah, in marketing maybe, and even then you can just go buy 1,000. That was that remember that fucking trans activist that came after me and said, oh, you've only had an X number of likes on this and therefore it's unpopular. So then I just went and spent $30 and put 10,000 likes on it to prove my point. I did that. I actually was, that's why my video metrics are off too, which is that I put some, because I often test, because I was actually having to test the AstroTurf. I hate doing it, but I had to test the AstroTurfing stuff where you can just buy followers, and I wanted to see what they do because every year it changes so much that some work, some don't. So I had to put, I bought a subscription for a month on like it automatically likes and like follows, but it put 200 likes on a video and it fucked up. So this is the risk, and this is what I'm talking about for the book. It's actually research, but I only use my own channel. And then someone's like, oh, you're just buying followers. Yeah, that's why I do that, to see what happens. I don't do it. It's stupid. Because I don't care about that stuff. It's funny. So anyway, I said I was going to go half an hour ago. I'm going to go. I love you. But yeah, that explains the weird likes and looks and fucking everything as well. Very few people watch me. It's not about that for me. But I thought it was funny having people think that I got that many views. I do have that many. I think the subscribers are legit, but the actual views, no one watches my shit because it's too long. And I think I just don't get boosted anymore. But that's because I think I'm on a parlor list. I think I'm on a cross-reference database of people to watch. So they just deboost me based on having a parlor username, right? Yeah, I just like, the thing is, it's like, well, I'm not selling anything. If people don't watch it, they're the ones missing out. I'm just here for company and I'm talking and stuff. I like it when there's no pressure. And that was another thing about when you first start YouTube and all those people that like, that's why I told everyone to fuck off. And it's like, well, no, because I'm not selling anything here. I'm just learning. This is just me. Because I can't do stream of consciousness with a pen because I self-edit when I write. I will watch this back, or I'll transcribe it and I'll see what meat was there, and I'll then write the edited bit. So this is kind of like stream of consciousness writing. And that's the thing, is that there's no real place. So for me, because Natalie Goldberg, which is the writing down the bones thing, she recommends pen and notebook. But for me, I don't know. Why would I put a suitcase full of secrets in my fucking house? No, thank you. I don't want anyone to know my innermost thoughts that I've written down without seeing the context, because I'm sarcastic and stuff. And also because, again, every time I've fucking said something online or I've gotten in trouble for it, I used to keep an online diary and I learned from that. Okay. There's consequences to writing stuff down and knowing what I know about, data and surveillance and, all of that stuff. I just assume that all of my stuff is watched. So I don't feel like I can just write. So I was just like, fuck it, stream it. Stream it. It's easier. I know it's a counterintuitive thing, but it's just like, whatever. Because I also can't just record things and talk to nobody. I just talk to whoever's out there. So I said, fuck it, let's just talk. Because no one will watch it. What you do is you end up hiding behind, and this is the psychology. This is where I'm a clever reverse engineer of these things, which is that I know that most people won't watch 3 hours. So I just talk and I hide behind it. I know that because everyone wants 10-minute videos and clips. And so I know that the good shit's hidden. So anyone who comes and watches it will either be after I'm dead, or if someone's trying to cancel me, at which point they'll watch it and realize I know what they're up to. And it's like, yeah, okay, I don't think we should take this person on. It's all like, yeah. So there's no harm in streaming it behind 3 hours, because I know fucking no one wants to watch it. So there's a benefit. It's built in. See, that's when you actually understand this. This is the thing that people don't get about me, which is that I'm always 5 steps ahead of this. The only time that I got caught blindsided was when I entered the gender debate thinking that people knew that the grown-ups actually were on top of this, and that I underestimated I underestimated it. And I was skeptical about the narrative about the alt-right and the gateway, Joe Rogan and Tim Pool are the gateway to the alt-right. That was a research paper, and that's proven true. Like I actually went. That's a thing. That's a thing. I've talked about it, but I was skeptical about it, and I wasn't sure. So I went in looking at this stuff in good faith when I was sick because I was just fucking stuck there. So I just watched Joe Rogan stuff because he was also talking about some of this gender stuff when no one else was. Jordan Peterson was talking about Bill C-16, and I also then just sort of bounced around to all these supposed, I didn't watch any of the real alt-right dickheads because I find them, Ben Shapiro, I'm pretty sure I could destroy Ben Shapiro with logic and facts. But I could just say, you're a fuckwit. Here's another thing. I figured out that this whole veil of, this is the IDW strategy, which I can talk about. Again, it's maybe not a conscious thing. It's just, this is where the incentive lies. Again, the bits that are left out, which is that this civil discourse, when you're talking about an intractable conflict of politics, where it is incompatible, okay, like say capitalism or socialism, like again, assuming you think it's a dichotomy, which it isn't. It's just schools of thought that are sort of, the capital. Okay, you need to understand the classical the definitions of these things, which is the right of someone to exploit someone else, and that person not like exploitation and rent seeking and profit and private. The problem is that America decided that private property meant my stuff, which is not. That's not what it means. It's about rent seeking and exploitation, and so. Me as a business owner and owning, if you own your own labor, you should be able to sell that labor at whatever cost, but you shouldn't be able to profit off someone else's labor without doing any work. That's the managerial class, is that your job is to fucking fill out forms, and that basically have a downwind effect of affecting the working class. That's that is bullshit jobs, right? David Grieber. But some of those positions are intractable. And it's the same thing with the sort of the trans and women's issue, is that is a cleavage. I'm surprised no one – this is how you know there's not many political scientists in this debate, that no one actually remembered and I started to call it cleavage because it's just there. I remembered I was reading a thing and I was like, fuck, you should have called it that. But it is. It's an intractable thing, right? There's two fucking hills, two mountains, and there's a fucking gap there that's just never going to fucking disappear. And there's some things that are intractable, but this idea of civil discourse has been co-opted because that's in policy. It's not about, it's about finding some consensus where people can live with it. It's not perfect, okay? And that's where Keynesian sort of stuff comes in, and other compromises, right? So there's compromises, but now we're just in unbridled neoliberal capitalism because there's no fucking yin to the yang, and there's nobody going, hey, this affects the poor, because all of the fucking left are rich people who don't understand the plight of like the welfare class, okay? And they make again, it's just it's a blind spot. I don't think, again, it's not a well, it is. It's a class contempt for another class. It's just an in-group, out-group thing. The working class are vulgar and not polite and don't do things and don't, but it's not deliberate. It's just circumstance. It's just this blind spot. If you've ever grown up with someone who grew up sheltered with no fucking idea how the world works, you know what I'm saying. It's like they've lived different experiences. So, to a rich fucking kid in college, gender is the biggest thing in the world because that's within their remit, right? But at the same time, there's some of these things that are just intractable. They're not, but the problem is that in government, you need to find a way. So what happened with the gender stuff is that they gave gender identity and sex-based stuff equal weight. Now, that was largely understood that it was a minority of the population and it was in, last resort type of treatment and all that sort of stuff. But this is why it was a loophole in the law. It was a mistake. Again, it had good intentions, but it wasn't clarified that, one was sort of more than the other. And then you get all this rhetoric from America about how all rights are fucking inalienable and equal and shit. It's like, well, no, that's not the case. it's an ideal, it's a principle, but it's something that everything has to be negotiated between groups, and that it's inevitable that this is going to happen, and it's got jet fuel poured on it because it's for profit. If you look at the way that the investor relations crew talk about gender, about puberty blockers and the gender industry in their annual reports, versus what they're saying on the front end with their 23-year-old idiots who have no idea about like what they're actually selling or people doing their jobs. Okay, remember, Nazis and all those people siloed people so that they didn't sort of take in what they're actually doing. That's the nature of these corporations. They're so siloed that if you were to actually get the bigger picture, this is what happened with Facebook. If you ever actually get the bigger picture, you'd revolt. That's the irony of like United States capitalism, is that they're so afraid of Marxism because they know it's correct. So every time they fight Marx, and every time they fight socialism, and every time they fight this shit tooth and nail, if it was wrong, it wouldn't be a threat. And I believe Marx's analysis was correct, and that eventually people are going to fucking revolt. Okay, that's written by the CIA, is that basically we need to not have our people figure out that they have revolution as an option. That's pretty much there, right? It's twisted with Marx is, even the people who are yelling that Marx is wrong are implicitly admitting that he's right, because if he wasn't a threat, they wouldn't fight it so much. People write off fucking kooks. They don't fight the people that are wrong. They fight the people that are sort of got a point, like Q. Again, crazy, but a lot of fucking, asking the right kinds of questions about foundations and money and that sort of stuff, and interests. Again, that's how, if you study international relations or policy or global politics, you can see where they kind of went wrong. But again, it's convenient because it allows them to like lump political scientists and people who actually know how power works and, go, hey, America's got too much power as nut job QAnon, economic power, centralized power, globalist stuff. Yeah, true. Okay. America's fucking imperialist. True. Cultural hegemony. Yes. Manufacturing consent. Yes. Okay. Pedophile pizza satanic ritual cult. No, probably not. But still, you can see how they got there because they're not right. I mean, pizza versus cultural hegemony is quite a gap. But, the intent, the feeling, the core thing is the same, which is that shit's fucked and we got to fix it. Anyway. Yeah, so, Judah said I got bored with, so I think, okay, for me, it was, what happened, this is what I'm actually going to write about, which is that Joe Rogan is appealing for a time, okay? You end up funneled into sort of more radical shit. If you go into various things, you dismiss it, you go, okay, nah, fuck it. All right. Also, he talks to, I like it because I like comedians, and he talks to a lot of comedians. So about comedy, like 3 hours of comedians talking about comedy is like my favorite thing. But I mean, the IDW people are fucking, they're not, like if you actually scratch the surface, that's what I meant about like respectability and politeness and civil discourse, is that it's gaslighting, which is that basically you're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to be rude. And also what the civil discourse does, this is how, again, you could, they're inherently right wing in that, because if you are left wing in terms of socialist discourse, I talked about Bourdieu, and there is a theory called about the vulgar working class. And there's a whole bunch of the left who resist, respectability politics and all of that stuff, purely because it's a political act to be impolite and rude. And also, when you're being a fuckwit, you should just be called a fuckwit. I could spend 6 hours coming up with like reasons why I think they're fuckwits, but it's a lot more. It's my streams would be 12 hours long if I had to actually flesh out my shit with like jargon. I already speak shit and it's 3 hours. But I'm saying, like, again, if you're paying attention and you know your stuff and you know your theory, the IDW are right wing because there's this glaring thing about civility. and civility politics and respectability, which that is something that has never existed in socialist discourse, really. Yes, it's one of those things how far? You've got revolutionaries who just want to chop shit up, okay, right up to, people who, think you've got to negotiate and reform. But at no point was the left ever fucking, let's have civil discourse and never be rude to each other. It's like, I think that, there's no real polite way to say, hey, you're starving people to death, or hey, you're killing people. You can't pepper that stuff and you can't euphemize it. And so that's why the IDW going in their sort of narrow, when you watch the techniques that they use, there's an inherently oppressive, it's inherently anti-left. Okay, so it's not necessarily right, but it's not left. And there's these people in there disingenuously saying that they're left-wing and they're not. Okay, they might be on some certain policy positions, but when you scratch the surface around what they're telling us, they are the exact gentrification and the sort of, I always get this stuff confused. This is why I prefer, it's like no pressure on streams because there's so many things. They're part of that superstructure. If they're telling the working class to behave themselves, they're telling the working class to not get mad or upset about the way they're treated. So that's an inherently anti-socialist position because you have the right to be mad. It's like with feminists. Men telling you to smile and behave is inherently misogynist. That is actually, that's inherently part of the power dynamic that you want to fight, which is that, no, I will fucking speak. I will take up space. I do know what I'm talking about and you will shut up, not me, that kind of thing. And that's an inherently using privilege and power as a weapon to, saying it's an inherently oppressive thought process that sort of cottoned me onto the IDW. Again, it's not about what you say, it's about what you do and how you imply your political compass quiz that you took in 1989 about how you think you are. It's like, no, you are how you are. You can say you've got a headache, but you won't know if you've got, but only a doctor or someone who knows medicine and looks at the data and does the tests and looks at your behavior and monitors your symptoms can actually determine whether you're faking it or you've got a brain tumor, right? And that's what I'm saying. That analogy didn't fucking work, whatever. Marx is hard going. Actually, if you want a really great, a friend of mine, there's two books. Helen Razor, Total Propaganda. It's funny as fuck. And she actually makes it digestible and fun. Marx is hard going. And also the thing about Marx, I think that people don't realize is the words he's used. Yeah, the words he uses, I talked about this with private property, but the words he uses have been co-opted by these POMO people and redefined. So he had a very narrow, this is it's not so much about Wikipedia as such. It's about scholarship. Again, it's not like the event, it's the overall picture and context and how they interact and all this stuff, which is that different philosophers used across different schools, so psychology, economics, philosophy, they used words like ideology. And this is where the dictionary has all these fuckwits going with the dictionary, trying to change the dictionary. That explains again why it's, because anyone who knows anything, it's a thought terminating cliche, because anyone who's a scholar of certain things knows that even the word ideology can have 7, 8 different meanings depending on who said it, what they meant, which school they were from. That's why defining terms is so important in these debates. And that's why these people are so fucking obsessed with linguistics and language and changing. That's why, because if you're actually a political science scholar, rather than remember how I said they reach you at multiple touch points, multiple interactions, and you get something from Facebook. The dictionary is one of those, is a touch point for a marketing campaign, if you think about it, because if you go to the dictionary and look it up, you're going to take that on face value and assume that's the definition. But really, words have, depending on the school, and like the word ideology, you look it up, it's got maybe one or two meanings in the dictionary, but there's many. And yeah, but also that's why think about the dictionary as a marketing tool for fucking culture and hegemony. America, that's why the American dictionary, like, is like we are deciding what this word means. This is the authoritative. You question that and actually go, okay, well, what do the scholars say on ideology? Marx, when he said ideology, he meant he meant isms, basically. I mean, that was where his famous phrase came from, which is like, I'm not a Marx. I wouldn't say I'm a Marxist. If I know anything, it's that I'm not a Marxist, which is that ideology, these things are taken and packaged and used as a distraction from class consciousness to create false consciousness and have people bickering, which is exactly what's happening. Marx is right. Marxist analysis of the culture wars explains a lot, okay? Which is exactly why, like I said, I think in the blog post, I said the problem is the answer, which was really interesting to me. I was like, oh, the answer was there the whole time, which is that the reason why they try to defeat the enemy is because it silences the opposition to it. And I have a feeling that radfems have fallen into that as well, which is that, you know, that overall intention to decouple you and depersonalize yourself and, you know, detach us from material struggles is the overall campaign. And also for America to just decide what the word means. So this is that, again, if you're in the university system, you'll know how dominant Harvard, the APA, American universities, and they decided that they're the authority on the words. And that's a campaign. If you think about it as a marketing campaign where it takes 100 interactions with a thing for someone to buy it, you see how this kind of psychology is benign when it's lipstick, okay? Well, not so benign, but I'm saying let's if it's like something that you wanted, but if it's something that is political or your identity or something that actually causes you harm, you can see how this, and this is where it's like, well, you're not allowed to advertise cigarettes, and maybe we need to have a warning label on these things. And this is where it's like education has to be a warning label, which is and this is where it became so insidious with the tech companies, again, probably trying to do their best because they're trying to get people vaccinated. But this misinformation, disinformation thing, which again, I'm going to do another. I'm going into another fucking thing and I'm tired. I'm going to go. But I will be here. I might do one in the morning. I've got to be out in an hour away at 12 o'clock. Yeah, I'll stream tomorrow morning. I will. I'm enjoying this. I like this new thing where no one's going to watch it, but if you do want to watch it or you just want to have me on in the background while you do other things, which is good because you don't have to look at my face then. I really actually probably should start doing podcast versions of this. I'm going to start doing that again actually, so you can have it in your ears or your car or whatever. But but I like this. If you persevere, you know, just whatever. I'm just company, and I hope that I can make you think. My product has never been this, except for that sound. Sorry about that. But my product is always something obviously more structured. Obviously, if I was doing a speech or something, I'd be a lot more structured. But yeah, I'm just trying to. I don't know where whatever. Let's just figure it out. Figure it out together. I'm just frustrated that any fuckwit can just log on live stream and make so much money if they're willing to say the right things or do or compromise themselves, and they're all doing it. You got to pick a side and follow that side. But if you don't, then you're kind of out in the wilderness. But this is what it really means to be on a list of troublemakers. I think it's just, again, I'm not complaining. I'm saying it's been a conscious decision to piss people off over the years. But I think I was saying this, that I've got some sort of, maybe if I want to go and convince a broader audience that there's some compromises that need to be made, but I need to be clear on what those are. Because there's some things I won't compromise on, which is, ethics, which is unfortunately the biggest part of things. And like gobbing off about America, which is another thing that I can't fucking. But, I've just got to figure out where my income is coming from. And so, of course, I'll just try a few different things. And, anyway, I'm going to go. I love you. Thank you for your precious life weeks. I'm going to go. I love you. Get off stream. Yeah, I'll be on tomorrow. I'm going to try and do something that's more international friendly. I'm just aware that I'm tired at that time of day. I just, and yeah. But I'm going to try and maybe once a week get up super early or something. All right. Anyway, I'm going to go. But yeah, the replay's always there. You can always watch it. Yeah, and I'm just here. I'll try not to go fuck it really loud if you're just sort of half asleep and partial REM. Try to be a bit more soothing. Maybe I need to do the Sam Harris thing where I just do ASMR and sit there and it's nice and soothing and stuff. That won't last. It's unsustainable. I can't do that. I can't do that for long. It's like it bubbles up, it comes out and explodes. Anyway, I'm going to go. I might actually, let me know if you would prefer an audio like podcast download version, and I've been meaning to put it on my website anyway. I've got another podcast I'm doing that's a bit more sort of, edited and fucking theory and stuff, and storytelling. But yeah, we'll just shoot the shit. But, try to go easy on people who aren't talking out, because the thing is, I also know that there's people who aren't speaking up that wish they could and are hurting because they feel like they're not, you get what I mean, they can't win and that they're in a situation. And I think that maybe a bit more empathy, but also understanding the very real cost, which is that you end up here, you end up me, okay? And it's not a picnic. I'm isolated, okay? I've lost income. I don't get followers. Being committed to truth, this is what it looks like. Who's talking shit. I mean, I love the people that do watch, but I'm saying that this is it's lonely. Like the fact that I met one person who is in a position to be honest with me, who doesn't think I'm insane or doesn't think I'm a nut job or doesn't think I'm a conspiracy theorist or doesn't think anything. She just went, yeah, okay, I see what you see. And I also know that there's people who agree, and and people want to hear it. It gives me, I don't need like millions. What I need is just, the thing that keeps me going every day is one thing. Once it was like a generous donation once, okay? Another time it's like, I believe in you. You believe in me today. I listen to you. What you say matters. You're not crazy is another one. How can I help you? I'm going to help you, connect you with a publisher that might, get you a book deal. I might help you do this. I'm going to share your stuff. People don't realize that when you're not motivated by money and you're only motivated by that it is the little encouragements and the little praise. I've had no praise in my life. Like I said, the only praise I ever got was, so any little fucking thing is good for me. But just anything that, it gets hard to keep going because every day they've always got that lure of being able to go back and just do marketing and make more money, okay, and sell out. And I could show people how to fucking get elected and run election campaigns in the unethical way and make a fuck ton of money. If I was in it for money and attention, I wouldn't do this. I'm doing it for something else, which is for the truth and being wrong and going through and, trying to take some people with me and hope that I, do triage on this shit as best I can. And, in a context where it's big and it's easy to sound crazy. But, and at the end of the day, just a little thing like what you say matters, or, let me introduce you to someone who might want to hear you speak and pay you money to consult, or, those little gestures are all I need. Like right now I'm trying to get my book done because I want to get it out, but it's also, I'm trying to get it done because it's a blocker, and my branding and a blocker for me to get other things like, publishing or whatever. They want to see what I've written, and I haven't written for a while. So I got to get back on the horse. So a lot of these streams are just trying to flesh out the book. Get a transcript done and then like edit it and figure out where the bones are, because I've got the outline. I just got to flesh everything. I've got two chapters, the outlines, notes, research, and I just got to pull it all together into a story now. And but I'd like to get it to a point where I can do it, but I'm doing it on my own because it's a very unpopular place to be. Honest is very unpopular, and I think we need to give people more slack for being dishonest, especially when you're showing them, especially when the whole story is that there's consequences and that you're going to, most people don't want to get death threats. I know that sounds, most people hope that it's going to go away. And I understand that point of view. Okay. You can be disappointed and have a private conversation, but what you could be doing is saying, hey, you know, here's an argument in the workplace that's not going to get you in trouble. Like here's an actual way for you to dodge. This is, you know, like the pronouns one. I'm like, no, I won't. I'm not disclosing my private life, and that's all you can say. You don't need to resist it in a way that's like walking into a fire. What you can do is just find slippery ways to persuade without it being, you know, and that's the kind of space that I'd like to be in, is giving people tools to fight this thing in a smarter way without a fucking turf swarm, which feeds into the narrative that 4chan and the alt-right and all that just are fucking, you know, waiting at the wings to like, and then you get like, it's no point when you know the optics of it. Anyway, it doesn't work. Being right is 20% of the point when it comes to political campaigning. Optics are everything. Execution, fucking hell. Anyway, love you. Bye. I'll talk tomorrow. Bye.